Hello, welcome. We are going to get started, and I'd like to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve.
Those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Any emergency modifications? I should have asked.
There is none.
And then approval of the regular meeting minutes from January 10th and the special budget session January 17th. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? Jennifer, good evening.
Good evening.
I like your cheer outfit.
Thank you.
Are you going to something or coming from?
I'm going to a basketball game after this.
Okay.
I'm a little underdressed, but it's okay. Okay, well, we're starting off with Nordoff. We implemented our Student Improvement Punch Card program 2 weeks ago and did our first collection on Friday. Each teacher received a stack of Ranger improvement cards. Throughout a 2-week period, a teacher could award a card to any student who has showed improvement, such as increased participation, improved homework turn-in, or raising test scores. The teacher would punch the card every time the student improved. We collected the cards and sorted them based on how many punches each card received. We then randomly chose a student to recognize more formally from each pile. On Monday, we returned to second period classes with Dr. Relis and gave a small token of recognition to the students whose name was chosen. This way, the student receives recognition from the teacher to acknowledge his or her improvement, and then this is again acknowledged by the leadership class, Dr. Bayless, and the classmates. Teachers are enthusiastic about this program and students are enjoying it. We will collect again in 2 weeks. This Friday, we have our winter rally, where dance and band will perform live together for the first time ever. Winter athletes will compete in several competitions, and senior siblings will play Hungry Hippos on the gym floor. And Friday night, we will have our annual morph dance from 7:30 to 10:30 in the cafeteria.
What time is the rally?
The rally, it's approximately around like 9:32.
2 or whatever.
9:32.
Yes.
Approximately around.
Midnight o'clock.
Been there 4 years, I hope I know. And it's a lot. NHS Ranger Voices came on Wednesday to showcase some of the amazing programs that NHS offers. We also had on Wednesday our Honor Society induction ceremony where more than 80 students got recognized for their academic achievements, and Hank was our guest speaker. Miramani, save the date. March 11th will be a big Saturday school for us. Students with an absence during the school year will be asked to attend. Attendance will result in reimbursement of funds per student that will be deposited into our school budget for the next year. This fund pays for approximately half of our PE program. Our PTO approved the funding of the materials for the Gaga pit enclosure for a game similar to dodgeball to be built on the playground. Topa geared up for the Super Bowl by having a Jersey Day on Friday, February 3rd. We look forward to showing families around on Thursday at 9 in the morning for our school visitation day. The tour is geared towards new students and families who would like to learn more about Topa. This week, our leadership class has organized a men's soft drive in order to help the homeless in town with a much needed but typically overlooked item. Miners Oaks. Miners Oaks is hosting Street Eats on Wednesday, February 15th. The event is held from 5 to 8 p.m. in front of the parking lot. Gourmet tamales, It's the Sauce BBQ, and Deer Zing are a few of the trucks that will be there. Many students and their families enjoyed the event, as well as the staff and people from the neighborhood. This is a fun event and raises money for the school, so come join us. Summit School. Mrs. Usher, upper grade students, recently held a living museum of historic figures. Mrs. Eakes, primary grade students, learned about such figures as George Washington and Cleopatra. As they met with these interesting persons of our history. San Antonio School. San Antonio recently held a geography view. 6th grade Eva Tully Giles, I hope I pronounced that right, is the winner of the 2017 San Antonio National Geographic Geography View. She has taken the online test for school winners and will learn soon if she is in the top 100 participants in the state of California. If so, she will move on to the state competition to be held on March 31st. Congratulations, Eva, if she's here. And that is it.
Wonderful, thank you. Good, enjoy the game.
Thanks.
Go Rangers. Okay, public comments. Did we have any sheets for public comments today? No. Okay, we will move on to our special presentations. We have 4 special presentations tonight, so it's a lot on our agenda. So I'm going to just let each group know at the beginning right now how excited we are to have you here, how we know you have passions about these 4 things, and we just really, really appreciate your coming here. We're going to try to keep them to where we can get the full amount, the full effect, without running the evening until 8 o'clock. So I'll be working on that as we go, but our most very excited about this first Nordhoff drama program presentation of Steel Magnolias. Would you want to?
I do. I will introduce it only to say, because I'm sure by now they do not need any introduction. We all know about the presentation itself back before the holidays and what they've achieved since then. So I'm not going to steal John's thunder. He'll talk about that. But I do want to say, and John will remember vividly, that this happened. So I went the second Friday night, and I walked out when it was all over, and everybody's congratulating each other, knowing there was one more night. And I said to John, now I've seen tens, probably hundreds of presentations, including some of my own children's presentations, the drama and music, et cetera, presentations over the years, from Jennifer and I were just talking about it, from sizes of high schools from 700 to 4,200. And I said to John, that was one of the best I've ever seen. And I've seen Steel Magnolias numerous times, so I've certainly seen it at the adult level. It was absolutely wonderful in every respect, the staging, the pace, but mostly I thought it was remarkable how everybody stayed in character. You know, I don't know how a girl who grew up in Ojai can sound so Southern. I just don't get it. And actually, Mr. Shanahan and I, Mike and I, sat just a couple of chairs from each other, and we were looking at each other like, really? You know, are they really doing that well? So I congratulate you. You deserve everything, every honor you've gotten. And, you know, on to the wonderful city of Lincoln, Nebraska. How many in this room have ever been in Lincoln, Nebraska? Okay, really? Now that's surprising. I have not. I've not been there.
I guess the second one is who would go back.
Well, the Nebraska legislators do. Anyhow, but I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed it, and it was just absolutely first rate. So, Mr. Hoy, why don't you get us going?
Well, we are tickled pink to be here. We thought it would be smart if you came over and
We're going to do that.
over here.
We're going to do that.
Girls, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Kirsten Hoy. We're going to start with a couple introductions just so you guys can get a sense of our characters. So I'm obviously from Nordhoff High School and I'm a senior, and in this show I play Melanie Eatonton, and I'm Shelby's mother.
I'm Kelsey Hoy. I'm a freshman, also at Nordoff High School. I play Shelby Eaton, as said. I am a diabetic, and I have a son.
Hello, my name is Erin Snett. I am a junior at Nordoff High School. I play Truby Jones, and she owns Truby's Beauty Spot.
Hi, I'm Sophia Ehrlich. I'm a junior at Nordoff, and I am Clary Belcher, who is a patron at Truby's Beauty Spot.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Schumacher, and I'm a junior at Nordoff, and I am Weezer Boudreau, a crotchety old woman who is Clary's best friend.
Sorry about that.
Hi, I'm Giovanna Nava. I'm a sophomore at Nordoff High School, and I play Annelle. She's the newbie that Truby takes a chance on.
Well, ladies, if you're out and about this afternoon, stop by the Dixie Plaza Shopping Center. The radio station is holding a summer fiesta with lots of prizes and a live band. They're called Single Bullet Therapy. Very interesting.
Shelby, what have you done to yourself?
Oh no, it doesn't hurt.
What have you been doing? Malin, have you seen this?
Yes, I have.
Oh, should we tell them, Mama?
I don't think there's any point in keeping it a secret any longer. Shelby's been driving nails into her arms.
It's my dialysis.
What?
Dialysis, it's when you take
I
the
know
needle.
what it is.
Please tell us what's going on, honey.
How long have you been doing this for?
A couple of months.
Oh, Mary Lynn Eaton, I'm without words. Why haven't I been told?
There wasn't any point. Sometimes we just don't feel like talking about it.
And what would have been the point, Clary? There was nothing you could do.
We could have done something.
Uh-huh.
This is selfish. This is very selfish of you.
Hold it. You're all talking like this is something.
This isn't something.
Haven Jack Jr. put too much strain on my kidneys and now they're kaput. The doctor said this would probably happen. That's all.
That's all? That's all she says.
I am responding beautifully to dialysis. Do I look bad?
No,
You look beautiful.
But, well, maybe you can let us in on what's going to happen here. Do you have to do this forever?
I suppose, but that's not real convenient with a 15-month-old ball of fire running around. So I'll just have a kidney transplant and I'll be fine.
Is it that easy?
Sure, they do them all the time in Shreveport. 3 or 4 a week.
They do. My Sunday school class was praying for one just the other day.
But the hard part is finding the kidney, isn't it?
Oh, I saw them on the news. It's so dramatic. These medical teams fly all over the place carrying hearts and kidneys and who knows what else. But you want to know the thing that impressed me the most?
What?
They carry those organs in beer coolers.
Oh, hush up there.
I am not lying. I'm as serious as this. Those doctors take out their 6-packs, throw in some dry ice and a heart and get on a plane.
That's right.
But you never know when one will pop up, do you?
No, but I'm registered on the nationwide transplant computer.
Well, how long do you have to wait?
There are people at dialysis who've been waiting for years.
Years? That must be agony.
Yes, but I'm lucky. I don't have to wait anymore. Mama's gonna give me one of her kidneys.
When?
We check in tomorrow morning.
You are giving Shelby a kidney tomorrow and you haven't even mentioned it.
Trudy, will you please do my hair? I'm in a bit of a rush.
I thought there'd be time and words fail me. I think this is it.
Why didn't you tell us?
But we just told you. Besides, we didn't know ourselves until just about last week. We had to do all these tests and things. I'm the closest match.
Match?
Oh, there are 4 categories for an Army match, and I match the best.
Categories.
Swimsuit, evening gown, talent, and personality interview.
I'm gonna yank you bald head, Smarty. We are very upset here.
I passed that a long time ago.
I'm sorry, that's Tom's joke. I think it's pretty funny.
No wonder your whole family is in town.
Well, I was just so relieved it was me. See, I wouldn't want one of the boys to go through it. They're so young, and who would want one of Drum's mean old organs? Besides, the most exciting thing we have found with all these tests and things is that I have the constitution of somebody 10 years younger. How about that?
But it must be so painful.
Well, not for me, but Mama's operation is awful. They practically have to saw her in half to get the kidney out. It's major surgery for her.
They have to saw you in half. Oh, they do it on Circus of the Stars all the time.
Oh, yes, it's no laughing matter. Trust me, Miss Clary, there have been more than enough tears.
Besides, it'll make my waist smaller because they have to take out my bottom ribs to get the kidney.
Oh, now Cher had her ribs out to have a smaller
She
one.
did.
Oh, please, that woman is out of her mind.
Look, Shelby, earlier this morning I said I couldn't wait till this body of mine wears out, and oh, you know better than to pay attention to anything I say.
Forget it, Weezer.
Oh, sure, but
Oh, I'm a terrible person.
Oh, no, you are not, Weezer. You'd give your dog a kidney if he needed one.
absolutely.
But you two seem so calm and collected.
I'm happy. Look at the opportunity I have. Most mothers only get the chance to give their child life once, and I get to do it twice. I think it's neat. And Shelby needs a strength to chase after that baby of hers, and I have 2 kidneys, and I only need 1. I'm just glad we're getting it over with before it gets too hot out.
Ain't that the truth?
Remove the chairs. Remove the chairs.
Hey, dude. Hey, dude. It's totally different. Yeah. So, last summer I went to the International Thespian Festival to check it out, to see what the lay of the land was. And I had heard from several people in the theater community, especially Gay Jones from Ojai, how special this place is. So we went, we checked it out, and we saw it, and the amazing thing about it was we noticed that we're not too far off in terms of what we have to offer here in Ojai with our theater program. So I put it out there that we were going to try this year. We put ourselves up for adjudication, and we got picked. It was kind of an amazing thing. So if it pleases the board, I have some paperwork. I noticed you already have the article from the news press in your hands as well, from the agenda in the back. But it was a really special thing to get selected. I'm not sure how many schools actually were qualifying for our position in terms of main stage production, but only 10 in the country are going to be selected to perform. We're one of the 10. We have to take on the job now of moving our entire set, our costumes, our props, and our people to Nebraska, which is going to be quite an endeavor. So we have planned a fundraising campaign for the next few months. It's going to be quite ambitious. And we are going to try our best to take these 6 actors, as well as 4 tech crew members and 4 to 5 parents who are going to also chaperone, including the faculty of Nordhoff, who make up 2 of those 4 parents, which is kind of a nice thing. So it's kind of a special thing. The news press did a really nice job documenting what the not a contest, but what the adjudication was about. But I can happily answer any questions you might have about the process or how we got to where we are and perhaps where we're going to be going. I also included for your viewing a list of the estimated budgetary items on page 2, as well as a list of the cast and the crew and the parents who've been selected or have volunteered to go as well. But we're just, pleased as punch to be able to do this, and it's a very, I guess, rare thing to be able to say to a high school, group of kids, we're going to do it. So, good.
How did
Questions?
they adjudicate? Did you film it? And
No,
send it
they came from Kansas and Iowa. 2 teachers came out. They flew in on a Saturday. They saw us Saturday night and flew out Sunday morning. And those 2 teachers, I believe, viewed 20 plays across the country. That was their category, and we were the one they selected from the 20 that they saw. And then there's other adjudicators that are flying in and out of other schools all over the United States and Canada. So I don't know if anybody went to as far as Asia or Europe.
Last year,
But there was a group from the Philippines last year that attended. So it's quite a large event. About 3,000 to 4,000 students. Estimates are about maybe 1,200 faculty, staff. And it's a great program. In the morning they run sessions to show all kinds of skills for kids and adults to use in the theater. And then there's 2 shows a day, one at 2 o'clock and one at 7 o'clock. And the whole group of kids and parents and adults gets to see one show at 2 and the other show at 7. And we'll be running ours at 2 and 7 on one of those days, which is quite an accomplishment. So, any other questions you might have?
Which Saturday night did they see?
They saw the last show.
Oh, they did, okay.
They saw
And that's actually what I was gonna ask. So how would you have rated that one among the 4?
Well, it's interesting that the first weekend we had a light crowd and we had an adjudicator team come from the state on the first Saturday. And they gave very, very, very good feedback to us in note form immediately, which we started to put to work over the course of the week for that second weekend, which is probably why that second weekend was such a dramatic improvement for us. It was also, they noticed it. They noticed that things were kind of gelling now in a different way after that outside influence. So it was really nice to put ourselves out there and to be looked at and critically looked at and get that feedback we can use, because you never do the same show twice. I mean, you're always doing it somewhat differently, and sometimes you make a mistake and you just kind of roll through it, and sometimes you just hit this place where everything is working right, and that last show was working right. So it was a really amazing thing.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Did you guys know who the reviewers were? Were you watching them from backstage?
I knew who they were.
I
knew who they were, but they knew they were coming, but by that point we had already kind of said to ourselves, all we're doing is putting ourselves out there. Whatever happens, happens. We were not anticipating a selection, because after the first weekend our feedback was not so great. So we were saying to ourselves, we're just going to use this as a learning experience. We're just going to take it with us and not put it in the back of your head as a worry for them. So I think that really worked out really well.
And I saw the fundraiser show, what, 14th, 15th?
14, 15.
What else? Is there other stuff too?
Well, that's our initial hit to figure out what our take will be after those initial 2 shows. And then from there, we will have to get somewhat creative to fill the gap. I'm also going to be reaching out to service organizations in the community. There's a large donor pool of people who supported institutions like the Ojai Arts Center that I'm going to be tapping into as well. So we're trying to hit it in multiple ways, but after that first April, we hope we're early enough to know what our final push will be needed. So our anticipation is a heavy April hit, and then we'll just see what we can clean up after that point, as needed. Yeah, we had an idea of doing hair for the girls of the district. I mean, get your hair done, get some French braids or something like that. So, I don't know how that's going to work. We could do that in the Nordhoff parking lot on a Saturday morning. Maybe we'll time it with like AYSO signups or something. Get them all to cut their hair.
And you could perform hair while you're doing it.
Yeah, on stage.
Aaron, do you actually know how to do hair?
Oh yeah.
Totally. That's the amazing thing, is that they actually shadowed a hair salon.
My grandma.
Yeah, they were involved in that, and then when they were doing it, it was like, wow, everybody was saying, you're really doing the hair up there. That was not faked out. They were really working the hair. And it's 80s hair too. Yeah. So they have teasing and words. So it was different.
It's not a question, but I think this is fantastic. And it will be an experience that you'll remember your whole lives. I think it's just wonderful. And I noticed you've also got D-Task planned.
Yes, that's the weekend after our April shows, actually. So we're really hitting up.
And I know my son Graham still remembers D-Task. In fact, and this will be on your resumes forever.
Yeah, thank you.
What is that? D what?
Drama Teachers Association of Southern California.
Yeah, that's been going since 1920 as a regional competition. And it's another 2,000 or 3,000 drama geeks who get together on one day to categorize performances. And it's a Shakespeare festival in the spring, so we are brushing up on our Shakespeare as we speak, trying to get that ready to roll. Well, we thank you for having us and hosting us. If you'd like to make a comment, that'd be great.
It's just something small.
Okay, go for it. Take the dais.
Hi everyone. So we just have a really quick thank you we'd like to give, because part of the funds that have already collected for the trip that we're taking have been allocated by the VC Innovates grant, and that was created and written by our friend Tiffany Morse. And so we just like to recognize her and all of her work that she's done to make this possible for us. We're very, very, very grateful, and we're so excited. So thank you.
I did make copies. I didn't want to blitz you with paper, but this is the adjudication review from the two adjudicators. So that can be sent around, and you can use that at your leisure and make copies if you will. I just didn't want to blitz you with all this paper. So, any other questions before I step away?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
When is your birthday?
Today.
That's what I heard. So I
Really? Well, I'd say we have a little presentation for you, Mr. Hawaii.
Oh, thank you.
And before I do that, I have to acknowledge that as we were watching the presentation, if you heard the laughter from the audience, right, it was Mrs. Hoy. Now, between rehearsals at home and watching however many presentations there were, they have to be way into double digits. But she's still laughing, so I think that's impressive. So Mr. Hoy, we have for you, we don't have like a whole bunch of lighted candles, but we do have for you a birthday cake.
Oh my!
With appropriate candles that you can use later on after the rehearsals,
Wow.
after the rehearsal
Thank you
for the
so
musical.
much.
So congratulations. And I just want you to know that there's several of us gentlemen here who are very appreciative of having remembered being 48. Like Mr. Gilbreth and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Crawford. Yeah, it was a wonderful year.
Thank you, everybody.
Happy birthday!
We wish it could have been a life-size check.
Yeah. Sharon's just as good. By Leah, I have to take some of these ladies to rehearsal.
Yes,
You
we
wouldn't
know.
mind excusing us, but thank you for having us again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
Okay. Off to get another.
It didn't come down.
No,
Which didn't come out?
stopped at Kathy. Rotary presentation regarding a proposed outdoor building near the Matilaha Auditorium.
Okay, so I'll continue to serve as a brief introducer. I have two hats on here. One, obviously, the hat I wear when I sit here. The other, most Fridays, I don't get to every lunch, but most Fridays, as a proud Rotarian, actually since 1983, but here for the last 8 years. And I have to say, I'm actually really very proud of what Rotary does. I won't go into all that they're involved in, although I have an interesting flyer to send to you this Friday when I send you my weekly report. Bill is this year's president, has done a wonderful job of coordinating the community intersection on a number of projects. Sheree Edwards is the project manager. I just decided to call you that for this endeavor. And Nathan Kaler is our fundraiser extraordinaire. And Mark is
Mark couldn't make it.
could make it.
because of
Okay.
some
Well,
family
you'll explain
commitment
what
that just came up.
pretty much everybody knows Mark Whitman and the Whitman family. So I'm very pleased to introduce Bill. Bill asked on behalf of the team of Rotarians to have this time before the board to present the concept. The board, as I told Bill and others who were at meetings with us, they know all about it, right? So you're not starting from scratch, but you have your opportunity to say what's important to you. And he asked specifically for a direct statement from the board, should they be so inclined to make it, to approve the project. And he and I agreed to use the word in concept, right? Because while there's been a tremendous amount of work done, there's still T's to cross, I's to dot, and work that Andy and others will be doing on DSA intersections. But this is if we move forward on this, will be a significant addition facilities-wise to Matilaha. And I'll just stop there, Bill, and turn it over to you.
Well, thanks a lot, and thank you all for giving us this time. It's a hard act to follow.
Yeah, sorry about
Working
that.
Terrific. Blew me away. Well, as Hank said, I'm Bill Gilbreth, and Cherie and Nathan and I and Mark are from the Rotary Club, the one that sleeps in and meets at noon on Friday. And we're here to tell you about a project that we have in mind, answer any questions that you may have at this time, and then get your approval, we hope, of the concept of going forward so that we can so that we can go to the community. We think this is a process. A big part of this project is to involve the community in funding it and helping us to build it. What we're proposing is a turnkey, a situation where we are not asking for any district funds or state funds or other public funds. We propose to handle this project the way perhaps you'll recall we handled a project for San Antonio when we built the amphitheater for them in 2005. Now, the way we go about it, first of all, just very briefly, Mark couldn't be here in person to describe this, but as you'll see, what we're proposing is a pavilion, not unlike the bandstand in Libby Park that Mark also designed. It'd be 25 feet across, so it'd be a little less than 625 square feet. It would be in the now grassy area in front of the Matilaha Auditorium. We would have some flatscape and a number of benches. When we met, and I'll come to that, with Javier and his faculty, they emphasized the need for that from their standpoint. It would have some illumination. It would be very flat. At first we were thinking about alternative designs, but then we got into concepts of handicap accessibility and maintenance and so forth, and we simplified it. The way we come about these projects, because we're Rotarians, is we go forward in terms of a four-way test. For us, that's, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? And particularly the goodwill is important to me. It came to my mind in a kind of a irregular way. I read a lot of 17th century history, and I read a book about Amsterdam in the 17th century and how that community built tolerance. And the author's thesis, which I subscribe to, is that they helped to build tolerance in their community by having a common project. And in their case, because their entire country was below sea level, the project was to build canals and dikes around Amsterdam, and they didn't have DC-8 Caterpillar tractors. They had to unite as a community to do this. And there's a lot more to it than that, but that's why the process is important to me. We particularly, Cherie and I first began to discuss this. We wanted to do something for the school, but we also wanted to do something for the community. And the school is graciously letting the community use that auditorium for a variety of events. It's like, you know better than we do. The Film Society, the Chautauqua, the Nordhoff musicals, and so on and so forth. And particularly now that the community doesn't have a theater, it's become very important. We then began to discuss it with Nathan, who's in charge of our community service in Rotary. And we considered what we had done at San Antonio with the amphitheater. We think that the utility of this will be even more. I just went over to San Antonio to check to see how they're using it. They're using it. The faculty seems to enjoy it. The kids feel safe there. This will be used by not only the school, but also the community. When we went to Javier, well, what we wanted to do is we first began to talk to Hank and Andy to see if this is something that might be of value. And I would say we got a green light to at least consider, to think about it. As a matter of fact, Hank, as you know, helped us to shape our thinking because he asked probing questions. He didn't just say, oh gosh, this is just great. And that helped us. Then we went to Javier, and we didn't want to give somebody something that we think they want. We wanted to find out, what do you want? And he invited us to the faculty meeting, and so we began to talk to faculty members. How would you use this facility? We talked about it within Rotary because we do a lot of projects. Last year we probably gave to the community about $100,000. $70,000 in scholarships, $30,000 in community grants. And how does the need for this or the utility of this project rank against other things that we do? And we try to vet that. Again, in accord with our 4-way test. We got the go-ahead. Then I began to talk to Mark Lewis, who is the chairman of the museum. And perhaps you read that really wonderful piece that was in Brett's quarterly magazine about the centennial year that we're going to have this year, where the museum will have a picnic in April to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the turning over of the deed to the park and the post office to the community. And we thought it would be particularly appropriate to build this year if we can. We don't have a firm budget yet. We have a preliminary budget, but I don't think we ever have a budget until we have engineering drawings. And also, a complication here is, will we have donated materials? And we're beginning to believe we will. And we're not yet ready to publicize that, but I can think of specific materials that I have commitments for. Our ballpark budget is $100,000 plus or minus 25%. And then we will see really what the budget is. And we hope to do that in the very near future. But we don't want to go out to the community until we get the okay, at least as to the concept, by this board, and answer any questions that you may have before we go any further. We talked to Mark, and then we want to make sure that we're not doing anything contrary to the architecture that's already there. As perhaps you already know, originally that was Nordhoff High School, and that's Mission Revival architecture. And so we talked to Craig Walker, who is, kind of de facto the historian for architecture in our village, and he gave us the go-ahead in the sense that we wondered, did we have to be slavishly adherent to Mission Revival architecture? Because this is an octagon, and I don't see a lot of octagons in Mission Revival. And he said, no, you're doing the right thing. We don't want you to mimic Mission Revival. As a matter of fact, we want people to be able to distinguish the old from the new. So we think we're on the right track. That's pretty much it. What I want to do is to make sure that I answer any questions that any of you may have. One thing that was important to me in trying to figure out the budget is, do we have to pay so-called prevailing wages on this project? And I looked at it a little bit. I'm not admitted to practice law in California, but I have practiced law in New York and elsewhere. And so I did a little research, and I concluded that we didn't have to pay prevailing wages because we're not asking for any state money. We're not asking for the district's money. And I was delighted when Andy told me that he had gone to your counsel, your attorney, and that he agreed with us. And I think that's kind of unusual, 2 lawyers that agreed. But in any event, we also started to talk to people in the community, and we formed a Friends of the Pavilion, a loose group that we think are going to lend us a hand as we go forward. Now, with that kind of brief presentation, and I want to be mindful of the other things that are on your agenda and not talk too much, are there any questions that I can answer at this time that come to mind? Not.
I have one. But did you have Michael?
No, go ahead.
It's beautiful. It looks beautiful. Maybe Andy can show it to the camera over there. But my one concern would be upkeep. You know, what happens in 10 or 15 years? It needs to be repainted, and the district,
Yeah.
How do we?
Yeah, well, it's an important question because we want to do no harm and not saddle the district with funds. We think that it's going to be minimal in the context of everything else that's going on in the school. One thing that we're doing in the fundraising effort is to have paving bricks that we are going to try to sell for $125 and raise some money that way. We thought we would continue to do that in conjunction with Javier and his faculty and have some additional funds come in so that there is money for minimal things. We think, but that's really a question I think for Andy and Hank, how much it will cost to maintain this. We think it'll be pretty small. It's there's no water, there's no facilities like that. The illumination is probably going to be LEDs. We're not governed by the dark sky rules because we don't go through the city, but we are going to reach out and talk to those people and voluntarily comply with that. But we think that the cost of electricity is going to be minimal. As I understand it, when you extend the use of that facility to the community, at least to not-for-profits, you typically charge something that will take care of janitorial issues or things like that. And so I don't think it's going to be a situation where it's like other projects that I can think of. It's mostly hardscape. We thought about landscape and we thought that that could saddle you with things, and so we've deliberately not gone there. We've laid it out with flat work. I don't know if that answers your question, but okay.
Yeah, I think it's really pretty, but I'm just curious, is that, like, what were some of the uses that you heard or that you're anticipating?
Some that I anticipate is like when I go to the Nordhoff musical or something and we come out at intermission, it's kind of dark out there right now. It's a grassy area. People can stumble around a little bit out there. This will illuminate that and be useful at those kinds of things. We think it could also be used for some fundraising efforts on behalf of community organizations and the school. When we talked to Javier, the music teacher told us that he would envisage kids coming out there and using it as a small practice area for some of the musical events at the middle school. We also talked to faculty members that talked about having actual classes there or having people come from the library out there. Those are school-related things. We have not yet talked to the community at large, but we've talked to some people like Joan Kemper, who's been very involved with trying to help the auditorium, and she has some thoughts about some of the theatric performances.
Question. This is one of the things that I love about OHI is that our outside organizations are so interested in helping out our schools. One of my concerns, though, is I have a child right now at Matilaha, and they sit on the other side of campus for lunch and have absolutely no shade structure to sit under, and we're kind of ignoring the students' day-to-day problems in an effort to benefit more outside groups that, you know, that use the theater, such as the Film Society. So my concern is that we're not necessarily taking into consideration some of the things that are needed rather than just wanted. You know, I can think of a few projects that I hear from the community that people really want, like the pool at Nordhoff so desperately needs help, and the theater that they want to build at Nordhoff are projects that I hear the community so desperately wants. I'm wondering if doing this uses up some of those fundraising bases that could be used for those other projects. That's one of my concerns. My other concern is I really worry that there's a lot of people in Ojai who don't necessarily pay too much attention to who's paying for what. And that gets seen as, well, look at what the district did with our Measure J dollars. Because they just aren't aware that Rotary actually paid for it and the school district did not. The perception that this is not where our Measure J dollars are going is important to me.
Those are really terrific questions and troubling questions, and we tried to consider those. I don't have complete answers, but let me tell you a little bit about our thinking about how we arrived at this. We look at it a little bit more broadly than just the school district, because we try to help the community at large. We're concerned about the demographics and the needs of older people now, and need for rent and help. But if we focus down on the school, there are acute needs here. And this does not satisfy that acute need. And an example would be Abbott. You're probably familiar with Abbott, the program. Well, we funded it. Rotary has funded that, and I didn't want to, because I didn't want to become a line item in somebody else's budget. But when we took a look at the same kinds of things that you're talking about, like core needs, we had to fund it because nobody else did, and the funds weren't there, and so some things we have to fund. When we talked to Javier, he told us about the need for a shaded area for the kids to eat. And we really didn't know what to do with that. We have limited funds and limited energy. We got behind this. I believe that there's a growing philanthropy in the community. And it's most recently evidenced, for me anyway, by what the women are doing. What the Russells have started, particularly with younger women, to get them into philanthropic activities, and it's working like a charm. We can't build a pool. When I first mentioned this to Kevin, and I did some time ago just in passing, first thing he asked me about was the pool. That's millions.
In passing, we had breakfast for God's sake.
We did. More than once. And but we don't have that. But the question that I'd come back to is, will this take the energy out of efforts to, let's say, build a pool or whatever? I don't believe so. That's just a judgment that I make, and I can't prove it. I think people have stepped up to do some funding in the park, in the Libby Bowl. They've stepped up to do some other things, and we're stepping up to do this. We did the amphitheater. It has limited use, but it is useful, and that's what we're trying to do. I don't know, that's just kind of a social commentary rather than a, yes, this is better than a pool, because I can't make that judgment. That's for you. But I can tell you that if we can pull it off with your support, we will pull it off and the community will be better for it. I'm just convinced of that.
Well, I just want to say that, as I said when we had our 2 breakfasts, that I think that in any situation like this, it's great. Period. It's an enhancement. Period. And I think that it'll be very useful in the way you described. I remember you talking about Thomas Fredrickson. He's the music teacher you were talking about,
yes,
and his ideas for using it even during the class, during the school day. So I thank you for being motivated to do it, and thank the Rotary for its constant interaction with our school district and helping fill needs. And I thank the people in our community who donate money to do stuff like this. We will be probably trying to do a community pool, but maybe this is just the, kind of just getting the flow, because that's a multi-million-dollar project.
It's very close to Mark's heart too, as you know.
Yeah.
He's our architect.
Yeah, Mark
Literally.
Whitman being, is a big aquatic family, yeah.
That's right.
I want to be grateful. To be honest, I think when Hank and I talked about this the other day, and Jane, my initial reaction too was, well, what about the pool? So, you know, I think that's near and dear to our hearts, but, you know, it was interesting when my son wanted to do an Eagle Scout project. We put in a little bulletin board for the pool, which has had limited usefulness, but it's something that we felt we could handle, and we felt that it was a contribution. And this will be much nicer than what we did. But you know, I think we all contribute in ways that we contribute, and that's what's wonderful about this community. And we all have something different to give, and we have a style. This looks beautiful, and I visited your booth at Ojai Day to see this. That's where I first. So none of this is a surprise, but you know, the more that I've thought about it, we often don't see the utility of a pavilion, right? Until we're there and we're standing under it and we say, well, this is a really nice place. And, you know, at intermissions of shows or after the shows when the performers come out, or all the other times that you mentioned, I think that for many years to come, this will be a beautiful place that will make people feel better about their experience. It will contribute to that. And also, in using the hardscape, it will take away some of the landscaping that actually costs more to maintain than what this will cost to maintain. Although, I guess I should just say it, but I think it would be nice if maybe this could be adopted by the club to, you know, in 20 years or so, when it does need a little TLC, that maybe the club will look at coming back and helping with that as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just want to hear Thane's counterpoint now.
Right.
Right, well, so I typically argue against myself once I've made a statement. This time, I'll just leave it as that.
Hey, Bill, just take the win.
Bill, I want to say that as I watched you with your visual aid there, I was thinking, this is the old trial lawyer out there. He's got his damages, you know, and
As
must have
I
been
walked
fun.
over here, Kevin, I was thinking, you know, I really wanted to be here tonight, and I'm delighted that I got to see those kids. But I also want to listen to the Ninth Circuit appellate argument.
We were listening.
And I have my theories as to how it might come out. And I was thinking the same thing, except when I walked into court, it was usually with suitcases. And stuff.
And the old trial lawyer was very much present when Shelley asked hard questions, and you said, those are excellent questions, Your
Well,
Honor.
they are, and I don't have,
Yeah.
you know, facile answers.
Yeah.
But I've got answers.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks very
Thank
much
you.
for your attention.
Thank you.
So,
Do we feel a need to say something
well, the
formally?
only thing I'm gonna say is what I wrote, and I didn't want to oversell. I do feel, I've always felt from the beginning, and I did ask, as Bill said, numerous questions, and hopefully it helped along the way. Cherie, thank you for your leadership. Actually, I sent the board your text that you sent, and I thought that was really well done. And Nathan, thank you in advance for all that you're gonna do. And so I write different things on different agenda items, so I wrote that one sentence at the end of page 2. I do recommend that the board approve this, I'll call it potential gift. I hope it'll happen to the district. And concept, all I would say then is that we look forward to the next iteration, right? So when you have, if the board says yes, when you have something that's just about ready to show us how you're paying for it, but really, as you said, the engineering drawings and everything else, if you could come back, right, that'd be great.
I would be willing to move to accept the gifted concept, if that's something we want to vote on.
Yeah, we are approving.
Yeah, you are. There's action.
Yeah,
There's
I mean,
action.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
feeling like personally, I love the project. I think it's beautiful, but I have reservations and feel like I would need to see, you know, Andy saying, yep, this goes through, yes, the DSA, you know, I'm not prepared, but I'm one of five.
Well, you know, I think if I'm understanding correctly, this is concept. It means it will be coming back before us again in specific when there's a little bit more information. And so I think it's worth exploring. You know, it's not a pool, but it is it's an opportunity to link our schools again with our communities. And I think that's one thing that's really strong in this district. And the fact that the school can use it as well, as benefit obviously, but we're not committing to anything other than listening again, right?
Yeah, I think and as Bill said, he made the point in a couple of meetings with Andy and me and others that in the calendar of events, tonight's really important because you need to go to the Rotary Board tomorrow, then on into the community and say at the February 7th meeting, if you end up with a majority vote here, that the board did approve this project and concept with more to come.
Does this go through the same channels through the city, going before the planning commission and all of?
No, it's on our property. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, so any development on our property is gonna go through DSA potentially at the state level, but we are not required to go through the same
We don't have to go through the city?
city.
Okay.
Nope.
And we have Craig Walker's blessing. You can get any better than that, right?
Except
I
it's
guess
not on the
if-
planning
No,
we
he's not,
approved
but
it
he's
in
on
concept-
he's
on
the
the
historical commission, yeah.
but not on the planning.
If,
I know
if we
that.
approved it in concept, how would that not approve it finally?
It probably does, but if they find out, that it's not able to be done, or there are hurdles that weren't anticipated, then they would come back and say, thank you for the concept, but we can't do it. So I think, yes, you should anticipate that if you approve it tonight to move forward, that it will become reality at some point, hopefully in 2017, right? That's the plan.
That's our plan.
That's the plan.
And
So-
the reason I wanted it is, before I go out and ask people for $100,000, I want them to know that it's not a frolic on my own initiative, that it's conceptually cleared with the school board. And that's why I just wanted to come in and explain it, answer questions, and hopefully get at least a tepid endorsement.
Right, and you're not, well, we'll go, hopefully get better and tepid, but,
Yeah.
but the other thing is too, that, you will not see, I know these people will, you will not see if they come back and say, okay, now we've raised 100,000+, and by the way, the pavilion ends up looking like this, I mean, that's it.
Spinal tap.
Yeah, that's what you want, that's what you want.
One important distinction or just point is, unlike, let's say, the OEF cafeteria stage project at Nordhoff, where the funding turned out to not quite be sufficient to cover the full cost of that construction project, and so the district is contributing money. Actually, we may hear a little bit that we have CTE money as well going toward that stage project. Because of the way that this is being structured and being purely a Rotary initiative and not being able to have district support, because that would bring the prevailing wage, DIR, and a few other requirements, that if there was a point at which the budget turned out to be 110,000, you were at 90,000, we would not have the option to come in with the final 20,000. That would really change the overall budget to something far in excess of 110 because of the new restrictions on it. So I just think that's important.
And I suppose we could make any vote subject to final approval.
Sure.
Once we had the final engineering designs and funds available to move forward.
Absolutely. I'm already on the phone with the Department of State Architect, because in answer to somebody's question, this doesn't go through the OI Planning Board or anything. And Andy showed me the forms and so forth that we'll use. It would go to the regional office of, not to Sacramento. So we're learning how to do that, but this would be subject to each step by not only your final approval, but approval really by the Department of State Architect, which would be the board that schools use. We'd have to be responsive to the building code and the rest of it. And we think it's going to come out as an octagon.
So if you only have enough money for 6 sides, is it?
You and your 17th century.
Yeah, right.
Anyway.
I won't start telling jokes.
No.
It does remind me of one.
Did you want to reiterate your
Sure,
motion?
I would move to approve the gift as a concept, subject to final approval once we have the DSA sign off and the engineering designs and sufficient funds to move forward.
With the clear idea that this
That
is
we want to.
this is a good faith
Yeah.
endorsement.
Yeah.
This is not
Right.
subject to some future whimsical, well, we changed our mind.
Right, no, I just want to
Yeah.
make it clear, because Jane wanted to look
Yeah,
at
yeah.
more details
Yeah,
and.
I agree.
So are you seconding?
I am seconding.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
I'm gonna abstain. So it's 4-0, or 4, I don't know.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. Thanks, Sheree. Thanks, Nathan,
See how
for
the
coming.
Ninth Circuit comes out.
Yeah.
6.3, Career Technology Education, VC Innovates, who has a great Facebook page.
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to welcome Tiffany back. For those of you who were following the episodes of charter school initiatives in my early days here, so we're calling 10-11, sort of 2010-11, Tiffany had another position, less exalted, but still important. And I can tell you, we never would have gotten through that analysis without her, so thank you again. You were great. And now she is, as you can see, Executive Director of Career Education, and she and Kim are quite a team. And we're very proud of what's going on here in our relatively little school district, using the funds that have been made available, with Tiffany managing them from the state. And the point of tonight's conversation is sort of twofold. One germinated about 3 to 5 months ago, where when Kim and I were talking about, it would really be great for the board to have a direct presentation about what's going on with our now career technical educational program, sort of former ROP, if you will, right? Still sort of the same, but not exactly. And things were unfolding. Andy's been very involved from the funding standpoint and other ways. And then, a couple of months ago, Mike asked to learn about AB 288, which obviously, as you can see from the last slide in the PowerPoint, is sort of could be an ending point for the junctions between middle school, junior high, middle school, and high school, and post-high school. So we're gonna ask Tiffany to do a double header tonight. So do some CTE with Kim, and then educate us about where AB 288 is now and where it might be going. So thank you again for coming. Thank you for your last iteration with us. And I think, Kim, you said you wanted Tiffany to take the lead, but maybe now not? Or
No.
No, okay. Tiffany's
She's ready. She's
Tiffany's
ready.
going to take the lead. Okay, great.
Thank you for having me here tonight. I go and I give these presentations to most school boards in the county. We work with every single district. And I was telling Hank, I tell them all that they do a good job, but I don't tell them all that I really like working with them. But I really, really like working with OHI. I like working from Andy to Greg to Kim to the teachers. OHI really does a great job. I appreciate that if there's any issue whatsoever, I have multiple people that I can call and they will pick up the phone and then the issue is solved that day, always. And so that doesn't happen everywhere, and it's really nice to be here and to work with you and to get to share with you some of the good news and some of the great things that have been happening here. So I will try and endeavor to be both short and informative in our time together. So I just wanted to start with the funding overview, and I was a little bit surprised when I put this together. This is a fair amount of money for your district, and I knew that, but when we put them all on paper, I was really proud of this amount of money that you've been able to do some really great things with. So it started back in 2014-15. Just to give you a very brief reminder, there was a program called the Regional Occupation Program, ROP. The county got funds directly from the state back when the governor implemented the LCFF. They took those ROP funds from the county and they folded them into your LCF base grant through something called the 9-12 grade span adjustment. You may or may not have known that was happening, but it happened. So you receive now all of the funds that the county used to get. We are grateful that the county superintendent of schools continues to support ROP teachers at the county level through our general fund and our LCFF funds. So these are funds, though, we wrote 2 competitive grants. They took the ROP funds, and then there was kind of a little bit of an outcry. So they said, well, good news, we have some competitive grant funds that you can apply for. And so we applied for the first round. We got $13.2 million in conjunction with the community college district, which was pretty amazing. At the state level, there were only like 10 awards of that level, so we got that. And then next year they said, well, we're gonna have a second round. And they said, well, you wouldn't get 2 rounds. And we said, well, we will try. So we tried and we got another $10 million. So altogether, that's $23 million of additional funding, of competitive funding that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise, really to bring our schools and our CTE funding up to where it needed to be. So if you have any questions as we move through this presentation, just stop me. Otherwise, I will just move on to the next slide.
Well, I love the trend up to 2016-17.
Yes.
Can we keep that going?
No, the competitive funds are over. So you'll see I have round 1 and round 2. Those were a 3-year grant and a 2-year grant, all ending this year, which is the same year that we get the first year of our CTE incentive grant. So there's a little bit of an overlap of money. And so we're actually very lucky. Districts that didn't have the CCPT, they just started here in 16-17. So they had a gap of 2 years of no funding. So it's nice to have this year, and we've been telling the districts, be very careful what you spend this money on. There will not be a windfall like this for the foreseeable future. So be thoughtful in what you spend your money on. And then you'll have carry forward that you don't spend. And if you have that, and then the CTE incentive grant will be diminishing numbers over time, and those amounts are yet to be released from the state. So those are just kind of predictions.
I'm grateful. I don't want to sound ungrateful, and it's wonderful to get the money. It looked really nice there.
It is. We all hope for as much funding as possible to continue the work. So these are the pathways that you have. The pathways needed to be high skill, high wage, high growth pathways in the county. So after some work on what you already had in place at the high school and what you could add, kind of turning your singleton elective classes into pathways. And a pathway is really just a sequence of classes. And it may start in the middle school or the junior high, as you have, and it leads into some post-secondary training. The Career Pathways Trust Grant required that there be an articulated class at the end that leads to the community college. So these are all aligned with the community college, or in the process of aligning with the community college. And then you have junior high. You guys were actually ahead of the curve. Many of our districts are just now starting with their middle school this year, and you had some great work done last year. And then we really wanted to bring this type of opportunity to students at alternative schools, because if you think about it, who are the students that are pretty likely to not go to a 4-year college right out of high school? And it's our alternative students. And they really primarily are going to go directly to work, hopefully to the community college, but they have generally the least access to programs because they're so small, and it's hard to serve 36 students and have any kind of scope or breadth of programs. And so we took, in our round 2 funding, we took a chunk of that money and we started programs at all of the alternative high schools in the county, and that's been a great success. I failed to mention Becky Beckett in my original comments, but it's been lovely to work with her. She just has a passion for kids, and we have, if you ever get a chance to ask her about the impact of some of these programs, the stories are phenomenal, and I repeat them all over the place because they're just some really good impacts on kids who really need it.
So the funds that you showed on the previous slide, it's not just funding the teacher salary.
This actually does not fund any teacher salaries. So we try not to fund any teachers on soft funds because it seems unfair to their livelihoods. So this is equipment, program development, teachers developing curriculum, sub days, field trips, all of those kinds of things. you continue to fund the teacher salaries, at least at the high school and the junior high. We do have some section support for anything that's outside of the school day that comes from the county office. And we send teachers to you for chaparral, a couple of sections of teachers that are our regional, so we have a certain amount of teachers at the regional level, and we kind of send them out. So our agriculture and our graphic production teacher actually teach at, I think, 5 different schools in the county, and they run around and they dart all the time from Oak Park to Ojai and back to Ventura, and they're on the road all the time serving those students.
Well, all I would just say is I want to echo what you're describing. It's a really enormous blessing, especially to be in the district for as long as I have been, and to recognize what a wonderful opportunity this is for our teachers and our staff. I think everyone has been incredibly grateful. It has taken some time. Obviously you probably saw on the first slide that CF stands for Carry Forward, and that's a blessing because we have teachers who I think initially were like, wow, we really have money, we're allowed to spend this. There's a sort of a dynamic relationship one has with money, and so to have come from a period of time where there was less funding available for some of these wonderful opportunities, it's taken teachers a while, but now they're really moving with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. One of the responsibilities I have is to collect data from teachers about these essential career connections that they make through their pathways, and looking at the wide variety of activities that our teachers are engaged in. So if you'll go to the next slide, you'll be able to see, and I know you have the pictures in front of you, but some of the real life hands-on connections that are being made in our greater community. So for example, with the Environmental Field Studies program, that's a brand new program taught by Brandon Titus. He comes to us out of industry. I think we've talked about him in the past. But his ability to connect with Poco Farms and to have that course be aligned with the 9th grade environmental science class that's taught by Greg Lapine. They're doing some phenomenal work, and part of what's great about Nordoff is that we're small enough that we can create great situations. So for example, Greg Lapine is teaching environmental science at the same time that Brandon Titus is teaching environmental field studies, so they're able to do a lot of collaborative work together, which is quite magical. Some other really wonderful highlights, seeing the connections that Tom Friedman has been able to develop with the Video Productions Program and the Ohio Film Society. He now has a speakers series that has developed as a result of the expectation of, hey, if you're going to have this opportunity with these funds, we need to make sure we meet certain target requirements in terms of our students building those career-based connections. That's been excellent. Emergency response, you all know about Linda Bednarski and her wonderful program. These students have the opportunity, as an example, one of the field trips is to go to the Oxnard Fire Academy. And that's one of many different field trips. One of the nice advantages for teachers in these pathways is the ability to work with industry liaisons. So the grant provides a countywide representative who works with our different pathways. So, intriguingly enough, here in Ojai, we actually have for arts, media, and entertainment, Mike Etchert, who is a Nordoff parent, but he also works for the Career Education Center. So what's really neat is to see the web of relationships that develop as a result of the connections to the grant. I also have a multi-layered relationship with the grant because in addition to serving in the leadership capacity that I do, I also obviously am a teacher as a choreography teacher, and I've been able to take my students to something called Entree to Employment, which is a fabulous opportunity. The next time one comes up, we'll definitely
Thursday night.
Thursday night. And in fact, I think
also the 22nd.
Yes, the 22nd dinner
Burned in your
of
brain,
the year.
yes.
And it's a great chance for our students to meet people who are working in the industries that they're passionate about and they really want to learn from. So we, for example, for our choreography students, met Diane Duncan, who also happens to live here in Ojai. Knew Bob Fosse, danced with Gwen Burden, all these real life connections, and now she is someone who is an event planner, and though she's not a professional choreographer, all of those skills, she's taken them forward in terms of how she does her work. So I think it's tremendously exciting. The articulation, for example, that's happened with our automotive technology program for Fender Carnine. This grant has strengthened those connections, and I think has been really phenomenal because not only do we have hey, here's the mandate, here are the ways to make it happen. There's funding available, and so there's really no excuse for not getting excited. I'm really, really thrilled to have the opportunity to work with our teachers on this.
I'm going to talk just briefly about career and technical education. So sometimes we think of it as vocational education, right? And when I started 4 years ago in the county, we had 0 CTE classes approved for A to G credit. And now we have upwards of 80, and more than a dozen of those are for honors credit. And so we're really trying to say all kids, even if they go to college, will someday have a career. And so these skills will serve them well. So it's really taking it and making sure that these classes are accessible to all students who choose to participate. And just a side note, your graphic design class at the county office in the upstairs lobby, we had the same art for 20-some years. And we've been replacing it with gallery art. And so we have a month that we are responsible for having art. And I'm very excited to have Michael Swank's art up there, particularly kind of the stuff that's a little more edgy. And I think that's going to be really fun. So I love that class. So 2 grants, third one for CT incentive grant, hundreds and hundreds of pages. And it turns out at the end of the day, we can just sum it up in one word, and that's connect. Our whole goal is to connect. So we're trying to connect experiences for students. So Kim was telling you about the essential career connections. We know that students, when they're making choices about where they're going to go in their future, about 60% of students say that their choice was made based on exposure. And about 20% say based on what their parents told them, and about 10% say based on something my school counselor or teacher told me. So our job and our goal with these funds is to provide as many experiences for students, like the young lady sitting here earlier, to have those career connections and figure out what it is that they want to do, what do they like to do, and where are they going to go with their life. Also trying to connect the regional workforce education system. So there are lots of people doing this work and trying to get them in the same room at the same time, working on the same projects, connecting with our business partners. When I started this a couple of years ago, I heard the phrase "eaten alive by goldfish," and our business partners say, we like Haas Manufacturing in Oxnard. They have a very generous foundation that funds very specific projects, but they get hundreds and hundreds of requests in a week for all kinds of things. And like just little, can you provide hats for my car show? And can you do this? And can you do this? And can you do this? And really trying to centralize what we're asking for so that we have good asks of our business partners, and we're not spreading them around too thin. And that's a work in progress. We've come a long ways. There are still some teachers who have individual connections with their neighbors, and I imagine here in Ojai that's very true. That you just ask the people that are around you, but really trying to work with our business partners so that they feel like they have a centralized location. So working with, for example, the County of Ventura to set up internship programs that are all standardized through the county, so that we don't have individual people in different county departments trying to set them up, and really connecting those pieces. And then finally, connecting to our community colleges and what a great resource they are. So I'm going to talk a little bit at the last slide about some ways that we've been doing that. But our whole goal, all this work, is just to connect. So we've figured out that there's kind of this inverted pyramid that we have for students, and it has to do with resources. So really at the top level, for all students, we're trying to expose them to different careers, and everything from going on a field trip to the fire department, going on all kinds of field trips, having guest speakers. Then we get a little more focused, and we might have competitions, tours, career fairs. These are students who are a little more sure about what they want to do. And then as we move down that pyramid, really moving into things like entree to employment, which are really high resource for our partners, and making sure that when we're having those really direct connections with students, that it's someplace they want to be. So we don't want to, for example, send students to a STEM engineering camp for a week, which is a lot of resources for our partners, if they really have no interest in STEM and they want to be like a chef. And so really trying to get students to kind of focus down that pyramid. Finally, these are just regional services that are not part of that funding grid that you saw, but different things that we work on collaboratively throughout the region. A to G submission, funding career tech student organizations like Linda Bednarski, regional articulation, industry certifications, middle school. So I won't read through the list, but there's a lot of things that happen One thing that I have been very excited about is we have been able to fund the credential fees for new career and technical education teachers. And so they pay for the actual credential, but we pay for everything else. And then they have to go through induction, which can be anywhere from $900 to $2,500. And we've been able to pay for that for them. So we've been able to add to our teacher pool. So like Mr. Titus, for example, was a beneficiary of this. So we've been able to add teachers long-term to your pool by funding those upfront costs, which can be kind of significant. So that's been great. I think we've added 85 teachers regionally in the career and technical education area. And then finally, moving on to the connection with community colleges. So this is a little complicated, and I will say that on the dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment, this is our best thinking at this exact moment, but it changes every day. I'm sure Michael Shanahan can tell you the exact same thing. Every day there's a new answer. And I would say in our county, we are not ahead of the statewide curve of people who are doing this. There are some other people that have been doing this for a while, and we're trying to figure it out the best we can. But there's really 3 models. So think about these. They all have the same end goal, which is students get credit in high school for college classes, right? So it might be 1 class, it might be 2 classes, it could be 3 classes. It kind of depends. So the first model that we have, which is really prolific throughout the county, is articulation. And it's a high school instructor. You're collecting ADA in the during the school day for that class. And essentially the high school instructor, the college instructor meet, and we've been doing this regionally. They meet together, say for example, Fender comes to an auto meeting, and they say, these are the very basic things that we have to have in this entry-level class that students have to know and learn. And the high school teacher says, yes, we will write our curriculum to meet your standards. And the college professor says, yes, that meets my standards. Then we're very fortunate that our community college district here actually sends someone out to enroll the students in the college class in college. Because the college application is kind of difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it's a little bit prohibitive. We have people with actual college degrees who are like, I can't figure this out. So they come out and they enroll the students into college, and then the instructor on the back end submits them for credit, basically. And so the nice thing is that if students don't get a C or better, that grade doesn't go on their transcript. If they do get a C or better, then they can skip that entry course. So if you take, for example, Fender's advanced auto service class, we had to rewrite his class because we weren't teaching like automotive electronics, which we really needed to, because the entry level course at the college is all about electronics. So we had to up our curriculum. And once we did that, it was eligible for credit. So students now don't have to take that entry class at Ventura College, and they can just go into the second class. So it helps them because a lot of times those entry classes are very impacted and hard to get into. And so the students can skip that. We have to make sure our high school classes are of sufficient rigor, that we're not giving kids credit for a class so that they would go into that second class and not know what they need to know to be successful. So that's been really having integrity in the process. So the next option is concurrent enrollment, which I think you have done a couple of times at Nordhoff, where they send a college professor to your class. They get FTES, which is the equivalent of like our ADA. Generally after school, their teacher, their instructor, all students enrolled in the class receive credit. So if you get a D, that goes on your college transcript, which may be good or bad. Backing up to articulation, by the way, if it goes on the college transcript, some of those classes like Get Focused, Stay Focused, which is College and Career Seminar here,
yes,
that actually is transferable to CSU and UC. So even if you never go to community college, you can take that credit with you to one of those organizations, which is a huge benefit to students. So concurrent enrollment, and then finally on the right-hand side we have dual enrollment. Dual enrollment is a little bit tricky. If it's outside of the 247 minutes in a school day, then the high school, there's funding, and the district gets the college district gets the FTES. It may be during the school day. It's held on a high school campus. Generally, it's a high school teacher, but it could also be a community college teacher. This is the part we're really trying to figure out. There's some agreements floating around at the college about what this would look like in terms of the MOU piece and the addendum about who pays for what. There's a number of things to kind of sort through on this right-hand column, but this is the new it's not really new. I mean, there's new legislation. Well, so we had dual enrollment before. The problem with dual enrollment is that those classes had to be open to community college students. So if you had a class in the middle of the day, you had statistics at Nordhoff, third period, that had to be open for community college students to come and take your class. Why they would do that, I don't know. But they could. So this new dual enrollment legislation allows you to basically close that class. It's a lot of information, but any questions about that?
I just, before we get into the questions, I did want to jump in since Andy brought up about the cafeteria stage. One of the blessings of overseeing the OHI portion of the funding is the ongoing conversation that Andy and I have been able to have over a variety of issues that have surfaced that need that CTE support. So that CTE incentive grant has also gone to address our current Health Science Academy and some of the needs that they have in terms of the upcoming HOSA trip. That I think we have about 30 students attending that in Sacramento next month. It's also been a high priority for Fender's welding facility to try to bring that up to standard. So what's nice about the grant is not just, hey, here's what you need to do to align, but also here's the funding to make sure that you are meeting the industry standards that are expected, so that students are prepared for that next level of whatever course they'd be taking at the community college. And of course, the cafeteria stage is also an ongoing project. Ohio Education Foundation has been so generous with us. We do expect to fully expense the funding that they've provided to us by the end of this school year. And I know we're just on that frontier with Ron Tyndall's gracious hiring to really take things to the next level over the next year with the project. Your paperwork probably, I don't know if you've all seen, but we've been able to raise about $13,000 outside of the CTE incentive grant just from the community itself towards that project. So, questions?
Well, it's a good presentation. That's when you don't have any questions. That's a compliment, right?
I think it's also important not just that students are exposed to things and learn they love them and can move down this pathway, but also learn before they commit too much that they don't like something.
That's absolutely
You know,
part
I've
of-
always
yes.
wanted to be this, and then they spend an hour or a semester and go,
Medical
oh.
school versus Health Science Academy, very different commitment.
I have a 4-year degree in elementary education, and I was like, oh, I don't really like young children. I like older kids, which is good. But I went through 4 years, and I graduated, and I went, oh no, I can't teach kindergarten.
My brother went to law school, and he didn't want to be a lawyer. So
Yes, those stories abound. So hopefully we can prevent that and instead find things they are interested and engaged in.
Well, and College and Career Foundations at the 9th grade levels is so aligned with figure out what you love to do first, then find the school, then, or find the major, then find the school. So not the other way around. So often students are deciding, oh, I want to go to that school because somebody I know went there or my parent went there, and not necessarily thinking about that long-term question. So I love that the program has this very comprehensive approach in terms of looking at how can we start getting kids excited in junior high school about what's possible and giving them that 9th grade opportunity to really in-depth explore.
And I think what'll be really exciting is to bring in that job element. I mean, that article from the New York Times that I know you guys got
Yes,
about,
thank you.
that companies are actually starting to say, this is what we need an employee to have the knowledge when we hire them. And if they're not getting it, then they're making a connection with the community college and with the pathways to sort of say, you need this advanced math class in high school so that you can come work in our factory. Because people think, oh, factory workers, they're going back to the 1950s. You don't have to have that education. No, you do. And that's something that needs to be communicated to the students when they're in 8th and 9th grade.
Well, and that's what's really exciting about having A to G approved CTE courses, because there is that blending of those academic skill levels that are rigorous and intense at the same time with this match with career interests. So hopefully it'll be engaging for kids.
I have to say, given that there's so many people involved in this, when I first heard about this, I just thought, oh my God, this is just going to be a nightmare. And the way the connections have been made throughout this county have been absolutely remarkable. And the growth of this district's participation has been spectacular. I have to give full credit to the faculty who pushed this, because I know it's you guys building these pathways. When we had the first two, I thought, oh, that's okay. But it's just really, really good. I have to give everybody involved in this high kudos, because this is really remarkable stuff.
So I'll share this analogy. I may have said this in your presence before, I don't know if I have, but if you've seen the movie Fantasia, the closing section of that film has Mother Nature going through the forest, and there has been a forest fire, and Mother Nature is just spreading her wings, and everything behind her becomes beautiful and growth. That's Tiffany. She's like the fairy godmother of what's really happened for us. So I know that's hard to hear that, but it's really totally true. We've been really, really lucky, because it really comes down to having someone who has a vision and being able to articulate that and getting people on board for it. So it's a fun project.
Congratulations to everybody.
Kim, I'm at the understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Nordoff is not doing dual enrollment at this point.
Not at this point. I know that Greg and Dave Linson are in conversation about possibilities, but I think everyone's waiting for more information in order to be able to make those decisions.
We've reached out to Ventura College and definitely made it known that we're interested, and we have some people on our campus that are natural fits for it, so we're just waiting to move forward.
Dual enrollment, there's a lot of tricky things about the employment and who's employed and how are you paying them, and if it's a section during the school day, are you paying them? Is the college paying them? Are they getting paid twice, which they shouldn't? So, all of those kinds of things. And so there's really kind of one true dual enrollment program in the county that's happening, and it's because the instructor at the high school also teaches statistics, and that teacher teaches statistics at the college. So it's the exact same class.
Well, you have a Spanish teacher,
right?
correct?
And so I was saying you have a good in because you also have one of those. There are a few of those people out there that teach at both places, which is good because then we know they like high school kids, and the class is more likely to be successful. And so you are a good candidate for that because you already have a person who can kind of pilot that. So those are the easy starting places for this to kind of get some of those details worked out.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Good job, guys. Well done.
Thanks a lot.
6.4, I don't, is
He's not
Michael
here.
Shapiro,
No.
he's not here,
I'll
so
do it.
are you gonna?
Greg, you'll help me fill in for Michael's absence, okay? So, the board is fully informed about the visit 5 of us made down to the Ventura County Planning Commission meeting, and you know who went, so it was Mike and Bill Wyrick and Greg and Carol Hawley and I. We each had several of us had 3 minutes, Mike had more. He was the technical appellant at that level. I've shared with you that the vote was 4-0-1, I'm sorry, 4-1-0. 4 in favor of extending the 30-year CUP, 1 against it only on the basis of 10 less years. He would have liked to have seen 20 instead of 30, but they were all, intensely supportive of the Planning Commission staff report. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but I think the key for me, and Greg, lives it every day, so I want him to give you his view. But the key for me is that there were so many conflicting stories about, what this CUP said and what the addendum to the CUP said, and this updated report from the Planning Commission. And one of the things Michael would have done if he were here was to give you his impression. But here's what struck me. Going back to whatever year the original CUP was put in place, there was a principle involved. And the principle involved was that at that point, Nordoff started school after 8 o'clock. Okay? And the idea was to not have trucks from the quarry drive past Nordoff in the period of time when students were student drivers, parent drivers were predominantly making the left-hand turn into the high school. And then years went on, and Nordoff changed its starting time to 7:40 or so, give or take a few minutes. And the trucks, as I understand it, just sort of kept rolling. I mean, they were not limited from 8 to 9, they drove, and in fact, they were driving earlier than that in the 7 to 8 period. Now, we're having a little trouble getting verification on that. But in any case, Michael's point was that if the original principle was to stop trucks from driving when there's student and parent drivers trying to get into the parking lot, then at this moment in time when the CUP is being considered, then that principle should remain. Fair?
Yes.
Okay, that's the point. And so Greg, in his perspective, I from my perspective, Carol, who wrote the well-done piece that I sent to you about noon today, and then Bill from the city's perspective, joined Michael to try to make that point. All right, that's side one. The other side is that there were, according to the staff, let's just say, I'll just say what they said, there have been millions and millions of vehicles, right, that have driven past Nordhoff in the last 30 plus years, and there hasn't been an accident, at least related to the trucks. There might have been some accident, but not a thing. So therefore, even though they were not quite exactly corresponding to the hour limitation, there was no problem. So if there's no problem, then according to the staff, the rules of extending CUPs are such that if there's no evidence to deny it, then you accept it. And so Mr. Mosler wants the new CUP and wants the ability essentially to have no limitations on when the trucks can leave. Last piece of the puzzle is that, you know, we do have to be reasonable here, back to facts, that the way this loading up trucks and driving south of, I'm saying south, on 33 works, you can only have 4 trucks in an hour. So the hour we're concerned about, 7 to 8, there would be only 4 trucks, and there would be only 1 truck at a time, right? So they put a truck, they load it up, they leave, that truck leaves, and they load up another one.
But we all know that's not exactly what's been happening. I've seen 4 trucks in a row go down there.
I'm telling, this is what the staff said. Okay, this is what the staff said. Okay, so 4 trucks in an hour is all they can do. And that's what was said, and if Michael were here, he'd give you his opinion on it. But I don't know, that's the summary, what do you think?
That's what Mr. Mosler said, but remember, the CUP doesn't constrain the number of trucks per hour, it constrains the number of trucks per day. So there, I believe it's 20?
Yeah, over a 5-hour period. So basically what he was saying was 4, you can only do 4 in an hour.
He could do 10 in 1 hour.
I guess he could, yeah, I mean, it depends on manpower and all that, that's true.
So yeah, everything, I echo your remark about the confusion about what the original document said, and there was no agreement from anyone, Planning Commission, Shapiro, to what originally was said in the addendum. So there was a lot of confusion surrounding that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we just made our case and suggesting that if there's a small window to be avoided, it wouldn't be a massively prohibitive cost to his business, and if it could possibly make a safer environment for incoming parents and students and pedestrians, everyone.
So we asked for 850, we compromised, if that's the right term. Our group, on the fly, compromised 8:15, as the starting time for trucks. Well, that wasn't well received. The other complication, which I must say I knew a little bit about, but I didn't know it in detail till I saw it, the city is coming up with an entirely new way of having vehicles go past Nordhoff, right? And their limit, as I understand it, their plan is to limit 4 lanes to 2, with all kinds of landscaping and et cetera.
And separated bike lanes.
It seemed like it was well on the way to passing.
The concern is a pedestrian walking 4 lanes from
Yeah.
where the church, from Church Road across the street.
So, that I think maybe makes our argument even stronger, right? That, there are less places for vehicles to go. But in any case, the point of tonight's agenda item was to report on that, to let you know that there was, in fact, I said to the board, I didn't know this, there was a 10-day period of appeal, so that from the time the commissioners made their decision, if you didn't appeal within 10 days, then you can't file an appeal. Obviously, the city knew that. And what the city's appeal, by the way, is not to say what vehicles may or may not be on that road. It is to limit the time that the vehicles may leave the quarry. Okay, that's their appeal, okay? And so, we've learned within the last several days that the Board of Supervisors will hear this issue this appeal at 1:30 on Tuesday, March 7th, which is our board meeting day coming up. I know Greg and I will be there, and I'm sure somebody or bodies from the city will be there. As many of you who come always would be good, and I know, Greg, I'm sort of saying this publicly, various people have volunteered you to be the organizer of, I won't say a march, I'll just say, a group from Nordhoff, students, parents, to come and show the Board of Supervisors that we're serious about this. Okay, so I know it's during the school day, that didn't work so well, but anyway, I think that there's a difference between a planning commission and a Board of Supervisors who are out there being elected every 4 years, and we'll see.
Well, and I think for this board and for those watching at home, that is the very important message. 1:30 Tuesday, March 7th. My understanding is the more people go to that.
I think so.
And they're even suggesting parents from Miners Oaks, because they're concerned that the trucks, there is actually no restriction in the new CUP of those trucks turning right on and go there. The old one said you had to stay on Highway 33. This one does not say that. So they could make that turn and head into Miners Oaks.
And El Roble?
Which would be very, yeah.
Yeah.
So if we can get parents from Nordhoff and from the Miners Oaks area to come to that meeting and share their concerns, I think it would be helpful.
And I'll work with Don on that. I'm going to amend my recommendation, because I told Jane a couple days ago, Michael told me that he was just very ill, and he's not entirely sure that he is a formal appellant. Okay, so I'm just going to amend this to say supports the formal appeal from the city of Ojai. Okay, and Michael, he'll be there, I know. And I thought it was just really important for this board to make a statement. I guess the analogy I used was an amicus curiae, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the formal appellants before the, let's say, the Supreme Court, and then you have a variety of people who feel strongly as that appellant does.
Are they taking written statements?
I'm sure they will. I know they will, yeah.
I would just like to say, like Jane, I have seen truck after truck come down, so I don't know what the mechanics are of loading trucks and sending them off. But to say that they can only send one every 15 minutes, I know is blatantly false. And so, I don't know how that works. The other point that I haven't seen raised in any of these things is the chance of rocks bouncing off a truck and hitting a student in a crosswalk or on the sidewalk. I would be really concerned about that. And it's not just trucks. Most people avoid that part of town during the drop-off period because it's hard to turn left into the school. And compounding that with a commercial business, you would think that the quarry would want to be a good neighbor. And to force trucks through at that time of day, I think is just being a really terrible neighbor. So, hopefully we can protect the students and that time of day at the high school.
Is there a reason why the restrictions were only during the AM hours when we have the same problem in the PM hours?
No, and I actually mentioned that to the planning commission, is that we have all of our students come at 7:40 because we don't have a zero period, but they don't all disperse at the same time because we have athletics and extracurriculars, so it's much less impacted in the afternoon.
Okay.
And maybe that's the reason why the original request was made just for the one, but from a perspective of concentration of number of people at that area and that intersection is by far greater than morning.
Has there been any sort of traffic consideration for the development that's going to go in across the street? Is that going to impact the traffic along there?
I didn't hear that raised.
I didn't hear that anything across the street has been done.
It's for sale.
Thing.
I don't think it's.
Which one are you saying?
Like for sale.
There's something on El Roble, but not
15
on
years.
Highway.
There's the 64 unit senior living housing going in on El Roblar next to the Adventist church.
Right.
Is that what?
Yeah, that's up around the corner. So do I have a motion to support the formal appeal from the city of Ojai to the County Board of Supervisors?
I'll move.
I'll second it. Oh, go ahead. No, go. You wanna
All
go
those in
ahead?
favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. I'm gonna suggest we push for another 15 minutes.
Your call. Fine.
See where we get.
Okay.
I'm gonna take a hard break yet. If I can find my sheets. 7.1.1, Committee on Assignments.
Well, we happen to have the chair of the committee sitting here, right? Did you know you're the chair of the committee?
Oh, am I still?
Yeah, you are. So it's a
am.
it's a 2-year, among all the things she does, 2-year term. So we're in the second year of the 15-16, 16-17 term. We're now asking for approval for the next 2 years. You want to, Marilyn? Can you just give a minute or so worth of what this group does?
Well, it used to have, under NCLB,
Yeah.
we had to have highly qualified teachers, according to NCLB, teaching whatever they were teaching. And so if someone is teaching outside of their area, like one period at Matilaha, maybe a social studies teacher is teaching art or something like that, there has to be a committee who observes that teacher and signs off on that teacher.
Okay. So it's a combination of teachers at various points within the K-12 group, right?
Correct.
And 2 administrators. One of those administrators is you. And so I'm not sure who the people will be right now, but we're asking, once you approve it in concept, once you approve it in concept, then we'll fill in the names of the people.
Is this a standing committee, or is this being done
It's-
specifically
it's-
because there's
it's-
2 people to look at?
No, there typically are some. For instance, Jody, who watches over all this, wrote me a response actually to a question from one of the members here. And we expect there'll be 3 coming up so it's not 10 to 15.
It's not huge.
It's less than 5. I've seen it each year. But you typically do have it, and it has to be for an elective class, right?
That's right.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Any other questions, or do I have a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
I'll second this one.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. 7.3.1, College Readiness Block Grant Expenditure Plan.
I'll give this one to Andy.
And actually, Greg and I may share.
Okay.
So the College Readiness Block Grant was something that was part of the budget adoption for this fiscal year. 16-17 governor put in the last minute. It provided a certain allocation to high school or districts that have high schools with the initiative or the purpose to be to enhance the readiness or preparation of our graduates to matriculate into post-secondary education, with an emphasis, and the funding allocation actually came for unduplicated count specifically, unduplicated count students. So the emphasis is for low-income and EL students. Although the guidance that the state is also providing is that it's permissible and in fact encouraged to do things that can impact all students across the entire district. So unfortunately, they allocated out a minimum dollar amount per student, and we didn't even meet the funding threshold, and so they gave us $75,000 as the minimum they gave any LEA in the state. So interestingly, Valley Oak, who has 6 students who register as unduplicated count high school pupils, received the exact same allocation. They received $12,000 or so per student, and we have something less. But I know that Greg worked hard with feedback from Marilyn and myself, as well as from administration and others at the high school in developing this plan. The funds must be expended within a 3-year window, starting with this year, so this year, the next 2 following. And so I don't know if Greg has any thoughts on exactly how we arrived at the 5 initiatives?
Well, this largely came originally from working with our counseling staff and our AVID teachers. And our AVID teachers serve these kind of students with the direct goal of having them matriculate to college. So very much the College Readiness Block Grant parallels the mission of AVID. So work with them in developing what was needed, and that's why you see a lot of AVID College Career Center kinds of things in our plan. And also getting feedback from our school site council. Our school site council meets quarterly, and that's a regulation that all schools have, and it's elementary school as well. And who sits on that council? Students, parents, and so whenever we have discretionary money to spend, which isn't often, we bring it to them and we get their feedback. So this plan was highly supported by that, all those people, from counselors to fellow administrators to avid teachers to school site council members.
So today you're not being asked to approve the plan. Today is a public hearing
That's what I was just gonna
for the public as well as for the board to provide feedback on this plan. And then based on that feedback and Greg and I going back and potentially updating the plan, it'll be coming to you at the March 7th meeting for approval.
Okay, so can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll move to open the public hearing.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. I love it. I think it's a great use of the funds. I mean, I've already heard wonderful things about the library being open. We've heard over the years great things about the AVID program. 5 additional hours for a college counselor, who wouldn't want that? I love it.
Yeah, other than hiring Van Halen, that was weird, but other than that, that looks good.
Have you had many kids coming in the afternoons to the
Well,
library?
we have,
How is that working?
We have Denise Rimpo, who's our librarian. She has been keeping, I asked her to keep track of how many students came, and she came up with not only keeping track, but exactly what the students are coming for, what they're using, what they're asking for help on. I mean, it's like a list of 20 different variables. So I just hope the kids aren't spending all their time answering the survey. But I'll have great data for you at some point in the near future. So we've averaged around 20, which is significant for us, having just gone from students and their parents and their schedules not knowing it to suddenly having it. So we feel very good about it. And again, we have 1 to 2 teachers there, rotating teachers. We have special education teachers, English teachers, math teachers rotating in and out, and we post the schedule so that students can see when a teacher with a particular background is going to be in if they need to go and get help. So, and I think we'll refine it as we go. With all that data that Denise is keeping, we find that it's really English-centric essay help is more needed. It's really Google Classroom kind of help. I'll change the staffing structure to meet those needs, but we've been very pleased. And I think we've heard from a lot of parents as well that it's been a lifesaver for them.
The parents that I know are really thrilled because of the busing issue, that
Yeah,
they
yeah.
have a place for their student to
That's a great
be
point.
before they can get there. So it kind of serves.
Or they have an athletic event or rehearsal
Right,
or
all
whatever,
those
all those
reasons.
things. Yeah.
Yep. And there's hot chocolate in there as well.
I was going to
So,
ask about
give them a rough
food
idea.
after school. Like, that's a great idea.
So we're moving towards buffet and.
It's library cafe, the library cafe.
Well, at Chaparral, we have a CTE,
Yeah.
hospitality.
Right,
We
right.
could bring them over.
Thank you for all your help in getting this going.
Could we take a break now after this?
Yeah.
Cool.
You don't want to go through Maryland first? Okay, so I have a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll move to close it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Okay, so we will take a 10-minute break. We will be back at 7:37.
That's the projector.
Welcome
I'm
back.
We don't need the projector anymore.
Oh, right.
We are moving on to 7.3.2, Title I statewide program.
Marilyn's ready to go.
She's there.
She's there.
I included for the board a kind of a graphic showing you how fluid federal
That was the
programs can
handout
be.
that you were saying.
I wanted you really to understand what we've done and with No Child Left Behind. Now we're in transition, and then pretty soon California will be aligning with ESSA. And so I just wanted you to have some context for the school-wide program. The school-wide program is really a comprehensive reform strategy, and it's designed to upgrade the entire educational program of a Title I school. So the primary goal is to ensure that all students, particularly those of low achieving, demonstrate proficiency. Now, in general, a Title I school with 40% or more free and reduced lunch, which is our low income bar, they would qualify for a school-wide program. The opposite of a school-wide program, and you'll see it listed on my list under No Child Left Behind, is called targeted assistance. So when we receive a Title I allocation, which are federal funds, we can either do targeted assistance, or if we're 40% or more at a site, we can do something called school-wide program, meaning that you can use the funding for the entire student body and not just target just your free and reduced lunch. So I'll give you an example of how it might work. I mean, school-wide programs really maximize the ability of your Title I funds. So for example, Javier has a class at Matilla, I don't remember what period, it's a math intervention class. And it's paid for with Title I school-wide funds. So if he didn't use school-wide funds, and if he had used targeted assistance, no student in that class who was not on free and reduced lunch could stay in the class. So it's not only awkward to say, well, no, you can't be in the class because you're not on free and reduced lunch, even though your math teacher recommended you to be in the class. So it's just a way to maximize, having a school-wide program, maximize the use of Title I funds. Now, we have other Title I funds, and you'll see during the transition, it's called Supplemental Educational Services, SES. We had SES under No Child Left Behind, but we had to use these outside providers, and I think Linda Taylor was especially irritated always about the outside providers. We had to use Title I funds for only free and reduced lunch students, and we had to hire these outside providers to provide tutoring. Now, we still set aside the 20% for supplemental educational services, but now we can design our own program. And so it just really does maximize our use of Title I funds.
Marilyn, just go back to the point you made a couple of times about the 40%. So there's a threshold. I know I've sent you information on this, but district-wide over the years, we've been hovering in the low 40s, give or take. And which obviously means that in general, a school like Matilla or Nordhoff would be right about there. Okay?
That's right.
The elementary schools, Miners Oaks, of course, is quite a bit higher. San Antonio would be lower. This particular year, we have Summit at a very high number. But then when you look at Miramonte and Topa Topa, they're sort of like a little above, just above, right? Yeah, right, in those low 40s. So you're
41.6 and like 42.
Which is good, right? Which is good, as she said, so we can use the funds more generically. But still, I'm sure, with an emphasis on students, you know,
Yes.
who have special needs, not special education needs, but special needs.
Low achieving.
Low achieving. Right.
So you're targeting your low achieving students, but yet you're ensuring that all students are benefiting from your Title I funds. And it's really allows staff in schools with these high concentrations of low-income students to redesign their entire educational program to really benefit all students. So that's essentially what a school-wide program is. And I actually thought this was on the chopping block, and you know, it was part of No Child Left Behind, but then I'm in the middle of doing the consolidated application, the Con App right now, and it was on the Con App, so I know now that it's still it's part of ESSA, school-wide programs. So I'm asking the board to approve the use of Title I funding for school-wide program. And
Now I
our
get it.
Title I schools are all the schools with the exception of the 3 small schools are not Title I. Chaparral, San Antonio, and Summit.
The Summit is not because of the size,
Summit,
not the composition
the
of the students.
threshold for
Right.
Title I is really 35%. And sometimes Summit can have 35%, like right now, I think.
Oh, it's high. It's
They're at 80%.
80, yeah, they're at 80.
But then they can't maintain it. And so it needs to be maintained for at least 2 years to be a Title I school. So, for example, Miramonte only became a Title I school in 2000 and
Yeah. Yeah, 3 to 4,
10?
about 4 or 5
something
years.
in there.
Yeah.
Where they went over the 35%.
Yeah, I know Topa didn't used to be, they used to be
Right.
around
They are now.
37, they
They are
were
now.
just hover there for a while, so, okay.
Okay.
Is this something that each principal decides how this gets used? Is that how it
Correct,
works?
it's an allocation to the site.
Okay.
So when we get our allocation for Title I, say it's $500,000 about, probably, is that right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
We have to take 10% off the top for professional development. So if it's 500,000, we take off 50,000 for professional development. Then we do a set aside, 20% set aside for what I was calling supplemental educational services, that the school can design for just their low-income students a program. Then the remainder is used school-wide, so, and it's allocated by site. So,
By pupil count, by site?
Mhm.
Is it pupil count low income or pupil count over the course of those schools? You know what I mean?
It's low income.
Low income, right.
so
So they're
like Myers
disproportionate,
Oaks,
would get a disproportionate amount.
yeah,
Right.
they have about 73%, I think,
Mhm.
low income.
Hmm? Yeah.
So they get 73%.
Got it.
So does our school-wide program provide some mechanism for reviewing each school's?
Yes, you have to have a plan, and so each school has their school site plan, their single school plan for student achievement.
Right.
That's the plan, and that's the mechanism, and Greg talked about the school
Site
site
council.
council, SSC, approving, and part of the approval process, you know, he might have an action that takes Title I funds, he might have an action that uses LCFF, Title III funds, something like that, and it has to be approved, and that's the mechanism of accountability.
Those were the words I was about to say. Mechanism, that's
There you
very,
go.
very well said. Perfect.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion to approve the Title I school-wide program?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Thank you.
7.3.3 is our resolution in recognition of African American History Month, and in light of all that is going on in this country, I'd actually like to read it tonight instead of just vote on it. Whereas African American history reflects a determined spirit of perseverance and cultural pride in its struggle to equally share in the opportunities of a nation founded upon the principles of freedom and liberty for all people. And whereas African American citizens have participated in every American effort to secure, protect, and advance the cause of freedom and civil rights, as reflected by the bravery of the soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry Regiment, those who sat at whites-only lunch counters and walked rather than used segregated buses. And whereas these stories act as an inspiration to all citizens, they tell of the triumph of the human spirit. They are stories of everyday people rising above their circumstances and the prejudice of others to build lives of dignity. And whereas the history, social science framework of California Public Schools K through 12 states that the history curriculum of community, state, region, nation, and world must reflect the experiences of men and women of different racial, religious, and ethnic groups. And whereas all students need an opportunity to understand the common humanity, I'm gonna start crying. All students need an opportunity to understand the common humanity underlying all people, to develop pride in their own identity and heritage, and to respect and accept the identity and heritage of other. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Ojai Unified School District hereby recognizes the month of February as African American History Month and encourages all schools to support this occasion by participating in appropriate instructional activities. So a motion to approve Resolution 161713.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed.
Do we know anything about the particular?
I'll have a report for you on March 7th. We always do that. I'll ask for each principal to identify the activities that took place over the previous 3 weeks and 3 to 4 weeks, and we'll have a segment on the March 7th agenda.
Great. I always like those.
Yeah.
Item 7.4.1, Measure J, update and introduction of our new bond manager.
Andy, it's all yours.
Well, I was looking back at Hank's notes about today's board meeting, and he described in this agenda item that I've been over the top since Ron started, and I'd say that's a fair description. I've been absolutely thrilled. I'm not going to go too far into the history of how we got to the point of hiring an internal bond manager, but I will say that we had a strong applicant pool from which we selected from. Ron clearly showed himself to be the strongest candidate in that pool, both from a skills and experience background, having spent 22 years as a building inspector, I believe 6 or so, a number of years as a head of building inspection department for City of Ventura. He also worked for the County of Ventura. Also has served as a general contractor here in the Valley for decades, and is actually a Nordhoff alum as well, and had children go through the district too. So has incredible experience, but also I think that you guys will see here quickly in a couple minutes that he wanted to present on where we are with Measure J projects upcoming. That his personality just fits so well and so quickly into the fabric of our district and our culture, and already I've received a number of emails of people saying how much they enjoyed having the opportunity to meet with Ron and discuss whether it was a kitchen upgrade at Topa or the Nordhoff Stage project, that he just really brings a personality and just brings a mindset toward projects that just is really already inspiring confidence of us really being able to make that next step forward that we all have been feeling that we were not making the progress that we'd like. So I'm very confident that this is the right person with this district to help us be able to advance things forward. So with that introduction, I'm going to have Ron come up, and he's going to just share a little bit about his impressions of the first couple weeks and what he's seeing as the projects from that original list that we've been now discussing back since September on projects that we are going to really heavily focus on and believe we have ability to complete this summer, if not sooner.
Well, it's an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to present this to you. It's been a pretty good week, or 2 weeks actually. I met with a lot of people. We got a lot of progress as far as prioritizing items that we're going to be doing, and especially the ones we're looking to complete this summer, which are listed here. Met with the folks for the Nordhoff Cafeteria stage remodel to bring up that to a different level, add onto the stage, remove a wall, upgrade the lighting and electrical. So that's in progress right now, and we've had several meetings, and we're really moving on that. The Nordhoff Gym locker room roofing project is going to go on this summer and hopefully get completed pretty much early in the summer. And we're also working on Nordhoff. We're working a industrial arch welding ventilation program. They don't have enough stations for the welding, and the fumes need to be exhausted out away from the kids and such, so that we're putting in a system to add 8 more systems to it and provide a much better environment for them to learn in. And that's ongoing right now. Matilla Gym and foyer is going to get re-roofed. Try to get that fixed up. It's been leaking for quite a while, and we need to protect our old gym there. Kitchen upgrades. Topa Topa is going to get completely remodeled this summer, and then by possibly spring break or summer, we're going to have the environmental health corrections for both Nordhoff and Matilla at least mitigated to the point where we have a little time from them to fully remodel it down the road. And Miramani is going to be exteriorly painted. They're letting the bid right now, so that's going to happen this summer also, or during spring break. And then Miners Oaks, the classrooms 24 through 27, or the modular buildings are going to be removed, and that's in the process right now of meeting to disconnect all the utilities and such, and then get that program going. So that's pretty much what I've been doing for 2 weeks is getting this together, and we got a lot of stuff in place right now that's going to really start moving forward. I know everybody wants to see a lot of progress because it's been so long since the bond's been passed, and we need some movement, and I think we're going to see quite a bit here in the next 4 or 5 months. So, thank you.
So certainly not an exhaustive list of all the projects that'll be worked on this summer, but you can see that Ron already, as he said, only about 2 weeks of being here, has been across the entire district and has been meeting with lots of folks and already reaching out to contractors and vendors and beginning to put together concepts of how exactly we'll go out to bid on these projects. You can see though from that list that we're really prioritizing right now, first and foremost, things have been identified by health and safety, either the health department when it comes to the kitchens, which have told us that if we do not have these improved by the summer, then they would be threatening shutting down our kitchens come next school year. Or the exhausting ventilation system in the welding class at the high school. These are really things that are focused first and foremost on the health and safety of our students and of the school. And then as we've talked about a number of times, as we look to a little bit more broad scope, focusing first and foremost on our roofs, especially as we've experienced in the past few weeks with the rain. We know that we're going to be doing a number of roofing projects with the primary, initial focus on those 2 gymnasiums, but we're certainly going to be pursuing going beyond just those 2.
Ron, welcome.
Thank you very much.
A couple questions. Have you had any interaction with any of the county? Sorry, maybe it's county, right, on the pool? The sort of kicking the can down the road that's been happening for us?
Yeah, it is the county who is who monitors that. I don't believe you have had any interaction with that.
I had a short overview with Craig, and the county environmental health handles all the commercial pools and such, and I haven't really had much interaction yet with that.
So I think we're generally hoping to continue to kind of keep that in a sort of a in abeyance while we figure out what we will do with the pool.
Sure.
Maybe possibly a bigger project than otherwise.
Yeah.
And I want you to know, at least from my perspective as one of the board members, I'm not somebody who feels like you have to just get a bunch of stuff done. I really want you to get a bunch of stuff done efficiently, because this money will eventually be gone. So I really want it spent efficiently, and that's really one of the reasons, the primary driver of having you here. Certainly some of us felt like having a construction management firm charging us, for every project, along with a general contractor, felt redundant and potentially wasteful. So we're really happy to have you on board.
I appreciate that. The dollar figure is definitely forefront in my mind, is trying to find ways to save money and get the biggest bang for the buck for the bond.
Right on. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Exciting.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Andy, this will be you also, 7.5.1, Introduction to the Discussion of the Second Budget Study Session, February 28th.
Well, I think we had a really productive meeting a few weeks ago with our first study session. It was very much a primer of getting an understanding of how do we arrive at costs for personnel, and we didn't really have a chance to discuss in too great detail the actual placement of staff in various positions, but you have that information. What we were talking about doing for the next session was really focusing on those non-personnel expenditures. I think that's necessary for us to get that strong understanding of what we're currently doing now before we really engage in what I think will be the more, well, not more exciting, but I think maybe we'll get, it's more exciting.
I'll say
it. The more exciting portion of really talking about philosophically, where do we believe the most efficient allocation of our resources going forward is. And so I envision that we'll have, following this second study session, certainly at least one additional, if not more, really 16 or 17, 18, budget build, budget committee, budget discussion on, again, how to, based on now our mutual understanding of where dollars are currently allocated, how do we believe, as we've talked about, the budget being a numerical representation of our district priorities, do we feel it really is meeting, representing those priorities well, or do we feel it should be allocated elsewhere? So I think in order to get to that point, to have that discussion, we really do need to focus on those non-personnel related expenditures, so that way the board and the community feel that they have a general understanding of where those expenditures are currently going. one thing that Jane and I had talked about in prior meetings was potentially having each board member take a different non-personnel related cost. So one person could potentially look at curriculum purchasing, or if one person was interested in looking at legal fees, or more broadly are that, dreaded 5,800 professional and contracted services grouping that we can, or mileage and workshops and trainings, so that way each board member can, I'll provide the same materials to everyone, but that we can have individual board members assigned to individual or to particular areas, so they can know that, that's the one that we especially would, appreciate feedback on or questioning regarding, or that sort of thing.
We were concerned about, the depth of each one, and if we felt like, for me, usually when I look at the consent calendar, I look at higher dollar values, and I look at things that don't click with me. Like if I see an electric bill, that doesn't, I don't go, I need to see every electric bill, Andy. I want to make sure we're spending that. So that's what he's at. We don't want everything of every piece. We want to say, well, that seems reasonable. This one doesn't, or we want to know more about that without taking Andy's entire month to have him provide us that information. So if you don't have something specific tonight, if you could maybe get it to him by the end of the week, saying, this particular, you pull out your budget, your audited budget or something, and sort of say, this is an item. And then you can get back to us and say, well,
exactly.
Jane and Michael said the same thing, so is either one of you have something else?
I was kind of thinking we were going to do it the opposite way, where we knew what the categories were, and then maybe we picked the category. But you're wanting us to go, and my feeling is that it would be easier for Andy to say these are the 10 areas that we're going to talk about, unless we have a specific area that's not one of those. And then we could, does that make any sense?
Well, I could certainly send something to everyone that says, here are all the categories. If you feel there are, we could do a combination. If I just think it's better coming from us, because he knows all, and he's been in deep into each of them. So, it might be better to have his advice, saying these are ones that I think you could look at, but
sure.
Just list them.
Once we get out of the non-personnel expenses, we get into this area that, is the quote-unquote discretionary kind of stuff, right? And some of it clearly is not discretionary, like the lights,
right?
HVAC, that kind of thing, unless we're going to do a wholesale LED thing or whatever, right? But there's not a lot of gain to be had there. I'm really looking to you to sort of point me to where potential gains might be versus the hard costs that we can't change. Personnel costs, unless you're getting rid of personnel, you're not going to change those, right? There's a certain amount of facility costs that are inflexible. That's your fixed costs, they're not going anywhere. I'm curious to hear your ideas, though, of where else in the budget there is flexibility, because I'm not sure. And I don't know, I don't want to sit here and have expectations of do things different, better, cheaper, because I don't know that capacity is there. We've talked about some real simple things like square footage of paper storage versus that kind of stuff, but that's like low-hanging fruit. And I'm not sure where else there is other potential. And so in addition to, I'm willing to look at the chart and see where I'm curious in specific, but I'm also curious to hear from you where you think there is any flexibility of doing things. Not necessarily tell me how you would do it differently, or just where are there opportunities? So that's kind of
and we might find it actually is the things that we think are hard costs. Maybe we'd look at, like now, most of our classrooms have those timers on the ACs and the lights, and maybe we would have looked at, so is there any way we can bring down our electric bill? When Andy first came on, he and I looked at the AT&T bill. That's outrageous. And he said, yeah, there's a way to bring that down. So maybe there are.
And that's exactly what I'd love to hear. It's like, what do you need from us in order to make some of those things happen? Or, You know, is it a change of policy or what? I mean,
There are some companies that are replacing light bulbs.
Yeah, we
For
actually have a
free.
pilot room. We've already been approved for a SoCal Edison's program. We're having a pilot room in Martha Lapines kindergarten class over at Myers Oaks. And so we're working on the timing right now, but end of this month it'll be installed at some point, full replacement of their bulbs and the fixtures to LED. We want to do a single pilot room so that way teachers could come in and make sure, there's some concerns, although I haven't personally experienced, but some concerns of the, different brightness level of the light might be harsher, or, the impact of having a different type of bulb in there. And so we wanted to do a single room to have teachers be able to weigh in. Assuming that there's the approval, we actually will be looking at the majority of the district being able to benefit from that program at no cost to the
Just out of
district.
curiosity, Prop 39 didn't give us money for that?
So Prop 39 did, but this is what I'm talking about right now was actually a totally free service that we had to apply through and be approved, but it was a service through SoCal Edison. So we do have Prop 39 that's just under $600,000 that would be able to be used for that same sort of thing. And not every room, right? Exactly. not every room will be replaced through this initiative, and so we could be looking at replacing the remaining fixtures, or we could be looking at the three main areas that Prop 39 has been utilized for in districts are either that sort of thing, bulb replacements, or HVAC improvements, replacements or improvements, and then solar PV. So those are areas that we could be looking at.
Are you looking at you're still looking at dovetailing Prop 39 with Measure J?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
No.
Certainly.
And are they looking at the color of the LEDs? Because I don't know anything about this, but I went to the store to buy bulbs with my son, and he's like, well, you don't want this and you don't want that, and you need to get this. And
exactly. So
they
that's why we're doing just the one room, so that way people can weigh in. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Blues
Different
and
levels
yellows
of natural.
Because I don't care.
rating.
Yeah, it's all the same to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have
Yep.
specific concerns, if you can get them to Andy by Friday. 7.5.2, update on the process relating to the potential lease of all or part of the Chaparral District office property.
Yeah, I'll take you back, if you just flip through your January 10th board meeting minutes. And you'll recall, let's start on page 3 of 12. And I'm sure you recall that Bill Wyrick came to speak with us that evening as an individual member of the council, not representing the council, but asking the board to consider delaying the sending out of the notices that emanated from the November 15th board meeting resolution approval. As Andy keeps reminding me, the board's already done this, they've already done this. But anyway, I know they did. I know you did it. And but I thought Bill made some good points. And so now if you move forward to page 10, look at 7.4.4, which was essentially the same agenda item on January 10th as we're looking at tonight. First paragraph's quite long, talks about the public agencies which now have emerged, as you know from your materials, as the recipients of the public notices. And then Bill talked about the 60-day notice and what that would mean for the city, and sort of in a way sort of causing them to have to deal with the issue potentially more quickly than they wanted to. Anyway, the key paragraph is the last paragraph in 7.4.4. After extensive discussion, then I recommended deferring the issuance of the notices and have an agenda item tonight. In the interim, and then after that, you can see I made the recommendation that four of us get together initially, so Andy and I and Johnny Johnson, Steve McClary, to talk about what it meant to get to a point where the council and the board could, not just apparently cooperate, but absolutely cooperate, knowing that this project, whatever this project may be in the future, will have significant time and energy from the city. So that was meeting number one. Then some days passed and brought together a second meeting with Andy and I and Jane and Kevin. So that was the team, if you will, from the school district, and Bill Wyrick came back with Johnny and Steve. That was a good meeting, okay? And we certainly reached a lot of understandings between us. It wasn't as if we had to sign, we didn't sign anything. We just had some understandings about what it meant to work together. And we left there with the next step being that our attorney, Andreas Chaltis, whom you know, talked to Matt Summers, right, to be sure that the lawyers agreed, okay, that the sending out the public notices meant X and not Y. And my goal on this whole thing was, let's go back to what X is. My goal for X was not just to execute the resolution from November 15th, but to have what we say tonight be the result of those good conversations, and then a week from tonight, when the city council comes together, they're saying the same thing, right? So that people see these two public sector bodies at the very outset working together. So, as recently as 4 o'clock this afternoon, I received a note back from Steve McClary, because I asked him after our meeting this morning, Jane, because I know Andreas thinks that he and Matt agreed. I wanted to be sure that Matt conveyed to Steve and Johnny, et cetera, that we agreed. So here's what it said. Steve spoke with Matt, and he basically, there's a little wiggle room, basically confirmed what we heard with a few caveats. I don't know what that is, but they're not important enough to worry about right now. We understand the district is moving forward on this, and we know the city will play a big part in it going forward, and we look forward to future continued discussions with the district. This is a big step forward for the district. So I guess that means yes. So that's a yes. So we're gonna, everything tells me that, remember I wrote you a sort of midterm between January 10th and tonight, that tonight, I might be recommending that we move forward with the public notices, or I might say that we needed to meet again. I don't feel we need another meeting. There's no other meeting, there's no other, right? I mean, there's no other meeting that would generate any more understandings, and this looks like the lawyers, as much as like Bill was saying, as much as two lawyers can agree on something, that they agree. So I'm recommending that we issue the public notices, those 8 public notices. We give, Andreas actually, let him do it, he knows how to do it, that you give us the authority, following the resolution on November 15th, to say to Andreas, go ahead and issue those 8 public notices, 3 to the city, and then the other 5 recipients that are required to receive those public notices. And Andy, is there anything I missed on that? Is that okay? All right, so that's a recommendation tonight, that you approve the issuance of the public notices. I would probably be later this week.
So we already passed a resolution to do so, and we're just confirming that we've approved that, and now is the time.
Exactly.
Okay. Any questions about that?
Just a couple. So, like in the some of the material we received, it shows section 1, section 2, section 3 of the property. You familiar with that, Andy?
Actually, I don't see a color copy.
It was in the packet.
So, are those formal lots? They're separate lots. They're 3 lots.
According to Andreas, yes.
Right. And so when we send out the...
It's in the yellow, Andy, it's in the yellow.
Not in mine.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
When we send out the notices, they're with respect to all 3?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then the notices, I read it, and I'm sorry, I just want to clarify, because it wasn't totally clear to me, based on some of the other things that we've been saying at times. The notices are going to specify that this is for lease only.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
So that ship is sailing now.
Yes.
There's a...
Yeah, I just sent out
Right.
the color copy.
It seems inconsistent with some of the things we have been talking about generally, which have included, the board's generally against selling, but if someone were to make a crazy offer, who knows what we might do.
Let's go back, that's a really good question. So we go back to November 15th. I thought that was quite clear. Right?
The resolution was to lease.
To lease only, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's no connotation of sale.
Right. I guess it's just a fine point of law that if someone did come in with some huge offer, what would that mean? Would we have to restart it all?
Doesn't that mean that we'd have to offer it to other public sector entities first and be
Right.
entirely
Start
a
as
conversation?
a fee simple sale.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I guess I don't know the answer if you.
Yeah, the answer is yes. We would be starting largely over,
Right.
and there are different agencies that would have different rights in a sale than the surroundings. Yeah.
But I guess the essence of Kevin's question, this is not irretrievable if someone comes in and wants to give us $1 gazillion. I mean, that avenue is still open to us.
Certainly open to us, but there would become delays at that point
Right.
where we'd have to take a few steps back and go through the legal process again. But no, nothing here would foreclose that possibility.
If.
A couple of other little points on that. And maybe this is the language that has to be used, but it seems like in a lot of our conversations we've talked about the possibility of leasing a portion of. This makes it pretty clear that it sounds like the entire amount.
Well, the notice says 7.5.
Right.
7.5.
I'm just wondering if the notice could say up to 7.54 rather than the entire amount, because I don't know if this locks us into the entire amount or not.
That's point well taken.
And the other part would be, I think that I think it's clear to us that if we don't get a good enough deal, that we won't move forward with it.
Mm-hmm.
But this is fairly strong language that we're moving forward with it regardless of whether we get the right deal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and maybe we have to do this, and I'm okay with that, but, if there's softer language that would work, I'd be all for that.
Well, so I agree that is seemingly what we're doing, but I think we just have to continually make it clear and communicate well that is not. And in fact, it's funny you say that, because when we met with the city, I'd say 15 minutes of it was devoted to what became an obvious complete disconnect. We weren't hearing each other because they thought that we were saying something that we're not. That they thought we were kind of, whatever happened, it's sort of like on eBay, the auctions that you're, whatever the price ends up being, I'll sell it, And we wanted to be clear, no, we're still, in the position of, if we don't like what we see, if we don't like the potential development, if we don't like the money, whatever, including all the way back to the genie not only going back to the bottle completely to the point of undoing the surplusing.
Right.
Because that was a big deal to Wyrick. He's like, well, once you surplus, it's a surplus. It's like, no, it's not how it's been explained to us.
It's just, I know it doesn't matter how many times we say that.
Right.
That's not the message that gets out.
Which is okay, I think, at this stage, because I think people should get really engaged right now. So if people get a little panicked, that's probably not a bad thing, because engagement will be good.
Back to your first point, I'll talk to Andreas. I'm sure he's included language in public notices that didn't define the entire piece of property.
Well, in the resolution say that.
But this one,
right, I agree.
I see what you're saying. This one looks like
I agree with your point.
Doesn't say up to or almost, or
Right,
could be
yeah,
less
that's a good
than.
point.
Right. Well, and as the city pointed out, there might be environmental issues around the gas
Yes, they
area.
did.
And
Well,
so a contractor might say, I just want these 2 parcels. I don't want to have to deal with that.
So, and are we willing to entertain that? Right? Are we
Right.
willing to look at proposals that don't include all 3 parcels?
Well, you're going back before this board became this board. Prior board, we for sure said yes. I mean, when Thane was president, he was pushing hard for that one section, the back section, right?
Well, and that's the section I want to lease. I would feel really terrible if we lease out this and we end up meeting up by the gas station.
I think everybody agrees with that point.
Everyone would just wear boots.
Anyway, I will, if it's okay with you, then I will get back, find out how we can modify the language to show flexibility of less than all of the acreage, and just recommend that you approve the issuance of those amended public notices.
But just for one last clarification, there is no step here that we're taking that so far to date that cannot be undone should we decide there's good reason to do that.
Unequivocally true.
Okay.
So I don't know that we need to vote here as much as say, is there anyone who's opposed to Andy or Hank talking
That's
to
okay.
Andres and saying,
Okay.
yes, move forward. Speak your piece, or speak now or forever hold your peace?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with clearly, I mean, maybe technically we already approved it, but the resolution says that we would approve the issuance. I mean, why not?
And if you want to get technical, I didn't vote on it last time.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so a motion to approve the issuance of public notices per the board's adoption of the relevant resolution of November 15th.
With said potential amendments as mediated by Hank. I will move.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. 7.5.3, K-12 Comprehensive Safe School Plans.
Well, I want to thank board members for your careful reading of the information that Kathy spent the better part of early evening on Friday trying to get to you. Thank Kathy in particular for being in charge of this agenda item, working with the principals, recognizing that we need to clean up the process a little bit. I think we're good on the key components, which is how to keep students safe, but we're not so good on updating. There's some references in there that one would have difficulty applying to January or February of 2017. So we just need to do a little bit more careful proofreading. That having been said, Kathy, anything that emerged from your work on this that you think the board should hear?
There were 2 pages that were included in the district plan that were not in the different school plans, and that is because we want to present to you updated numbers. You saw 14, 15 numbers for fire drills and for offenses of suspensions, and we want to update those, so we'll bring those to you at another board meeting. But no, I think, I don't have any other comments unless we have questions.
No, that was very comprehensive.
I just want to know for the various requirements, like at a different, each school, for example, is required, the principal is required to provide information to certificated and classified staff. Is there a process by which we can guarantee that that's occurred? Is there a check mark or a...
For instance, certificated staff being notified of suspension offenses?
No, of the plans.
The plans.
Of the
Like
different
exiting.
plans.
Yes,
Like
yes.
exiting.
Like how do we assure that just doesn't fall through the cracks and never gets done?
Well, that's a good question. The principals do go over these plans, and if they're not having a staff meeting, then we can ensure that they are at the beginning of the year, so everyone knows their duties in a disaster. But I believe they do.
So that this maybe would be part of the first
First
staff
week of
meeting
school.
Yeah, so since we happen to have a principal here, hey Teresa, can you help us on your 2 schools? How do you convey the various components of school safety and exiting from classrooms and whatever might occur in a school to the staff? I'm sure early in the year, it's not the kind of thing you wait until March.
There's 2 parts. One is like our regular emergency drills. We have our fire drills every month, lockdown and earthquake quarterly. Although at both my sites, we practice the earthquake drill in conjunction with our monthly fire drill. They just do it separately, and so those things are happening. And then with that flow chart that's in our safety plan that has like who's responsible for the different tasks if there's a very large, significant emergency. I usually talk to the people who are involved, like, can you handle doing the morgue? Some people can't do that one. And so it's the flow chart, and we discussed that at the beginning of the year.
So you have all the responsibilities covered as early in the year as you can
possible,
with.
yeah.
Right. Okay.
And then do you calendar yourself those quarterly or monthly drills? Is that you?
Oh, yeah, I work with usually the school secretary or the teacher in charge at Summit to look at the dates when it would work best on our calendar. One thing that we try to do, especially at San Antonio, is to really mix up when we do our fire drills. for two reasons. One is just for good practice, so kids know that when they hear that bell, that means an emergency and they have to, find a teacher, whoever they're with. We've done it at recess time. We've really tried to mix it up so people aren't just going, oh, it's a fire drill, march on out. I've reconsidered that recently though, for the reason that I remember hearing somebody recount that they had been a child in a school where there had been a very terrible fire where many people died. And he said, as an adult, many years later, he said, I knew something was wrong because we always had our fire drill first thing on Tuesday morning, the first of the month. And so it's like, that really caused me to rethink it.
Yeah,
And
it's
I had yet to
interesting,
discuss it with the staff to see, what their input would be regarding that. But yeah, we schedule it ourselves per site.
But it does, you have to fill something out for the fire department that says you had it and you put the date that you had it.
Yeah, I send a text message or an email to Kathy as soon as we complete our drills. I handle San Antonio, the teacher in charge handles Summit, that's one of their responsibilities. But I send that to her right away so that it's logged and I don't lose track of it. It's like, I know I did it, it's not there.
Right.
Okay, okay, good.
I have a question about earthquake drills, and maybe it's more for the audience, because I've wondered this as a parent. My understanding is the idea of going under your desk is kind of old idea and not as safe as we would like to think it is, but that is still what we're teaching, is
That
it
is,
not?
that's
And
right.
we check with the fire department, it's like, what is the best practice at this point in time?
Mhm.
And they say yes, drop, cover, and drop,
Drop, cover,
and
hold on.
something sturdy, which would be the desk, and they do say get under the desk. So, yeah, we've tried to clarify that, because at one point there was a lot of, thought that you get into like a triangle space.
Right, you get next to the
Kids
desk.
can't
not-
move quickly enough.
Well,
No.
and it's a really hard concept for, I'm imagining a kindergarten class trying to convince them to get into a
Simplicity.
triangle. and-
Right. No, the
I've
American,
often wondered how you would do that.
the American Red Cross suggests the duck, hold on, and under the desk.
Okay.
Because particularly we're talking about in an earthquake. So things are moving through the room. It's not safe to run out. And the concept of triangle of life was a private company's suggestion. It's not been proven to be sufficient.
Oh.
It seems that most of the stuff that would fall would be light enough that a desk would protect them, right? These lights and the acoustic tiles.
Now, if you happen to be in bed when an earthquake happens, yes, going down onto the floor to the side of the bed is your best solution, but not in a classroom situation.
I thought that recommendation came from the classroom, from the Mexico earthquake in the 80s, and they went
No,
into
this-
the classrooms and saw
It
that.
was it was a private company that came up with this triangle of life, but also those are buildings that are not built to the same standards as the United States. So in those kinds of construction development, it has been helpful, but in the United States, the American Red Cross still stands behind the other.
Okay.
Any other questions?
See, that wasn't so easy.
A motion to approve the K-12 safe school plans.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. 7.5.4, update on the status of safe haven issue. I do want to just, before you speak, Hank, point out that this issue was raised by the state superintendent of schools. That's why it sort of came to our docket and why we're discussing it.
Okay, well, as you can see, it came to all school districts in the state early in what at least was our winter break. And for, as Kevin says, for those in the audience watching, but more particularly for our two union presidents who constitute our audience right now. So thank you for staying, along with Teresa, of course, who's been a great attendee. I'd be happy to share all the information I have, and we can talk about that right after the meeting if you want. But in any case, what the board received in the last several days was just one example of, you remember when Tiffany and Mike were talking about how things change daily or almost daily in their life when it comes to the relationship between the community colleges and K-12 schools. I think it's outpaced only by what's happening in California and the Ventura County and the nation dealing with the immigration issue. And so I sent to the board an article from February 1st whereby the Assembly, the Senate in particular at this point, is working toward what might become statewide sanctuary for immigration that is all throughout California. How that affects school districts is, absolutely to be determined. But certainly, I can tell you that the unanimous position from Stan Mantooth on through everybody with whom I've spoken, everything I've read, is that immigration authorities are not going to be walking onto school campuses to try to find illegal immigrants. It's just not going to happen. Now, that having been said, that in and of itself does not prohibit or should tell school districts, just don't say anything about the issue, which is sort of at least I'm struggling with. So there are a couple of components here that I just want to emphasize very quickly. One is what I just emphasized. The second is that as I talk to superintendents, it's clear that if anybody were to intrude on a school setting to try to find out information about a family or a set of families or part of the population in the school, all school site leaders should be instructed, and I will do so this week, that if that happens, which I absolutely do not think it will, that person absolutely should be directed to my office and don't deal with the person at school. Just don't do it. And if that person won't leave, then call me and I'll get the person to come. And if the person won't come with me, then I'll call the police. Okay, so that's how it works. The person's going to come here. Then, when the person comes here, if that happens, and I cannot convince this individual that we're not participating because we don't need to because of all the things that are happening in and around the state, then I will call our attorney to be sure that everything I'm saying is supported by legal constructs as they exist. All that having been said, it's just not something about which I'm losing sleep. Okay, I lose sleep about other things involved with this issue, but not that. Okay, I do not think that our families, I hope no families, but I'll talk about our families here, will in any way be under siege by immigration authorities. It's just not going to happen. That's sort of the practical part. The board part sort of goes this way. So I gave to the board, for Angie and Chuck, I gave the board 4 resolutions that exist now in the county, right? Wainimi, 2 Oxnards, and Santa Paula. They have taken the position going back as late, almost right after the state superintendent issued his request. Then over the next several weeks, through January 18th, I think was the latest one, to adopt a resolution which sort of, and depends on how you read it, creates a safe haven for families in a very overt way. So what I asked the board to do tonight, as you can see from the material, is I want to get your thoughts, your counsel on, at this juncture, with everything you've read, everything you feel, how best to move forward. It seems to me there are several things we can do. One is, and I know this sounds a little harsh, but do nothing, right? So far we haven't done anything, right? Except the letter that I sent a week after the election, which I had shared with you at that point, was being sent by superintendents, not everyone, but many superintendents around the country, just to sort of moderate fears, and it was a generic statement. Since then, nothing formal. So one thing is we can continue to do that. The second is to move towards some type of resolution that might look somewhat like or not like one or more of the 4 that exist now. And I also told you there could be 2 more coming in the next couple of weeks. Ventura and Rio are looking at some potential resolution. So that's sort of the 2 ends of the continuum, right? Continue as we are, That's one end. The other end is to have a formal resolution, potentially at the March 7th meeting. And I would work on that if that's what you would want to have done that meeting. The third one is to write a sequel, if you will. I would write a sequel to the letter that I sent on November 14th. And you remember how the way I did that was I wrote the letter, I sent it to all the principals, and I asked each principal to write a cover letter on top of that letter to all of his or her families, saying what that principal wanted to say about the issue. That's the way I tend to do things. I think it's a more personal way to do it. You hear from someone in whom you have ongoing confidence, hopefully as a principal, and you know well. And that's what I would do again, and it would be, if we decide to do that, it would be sort of a mid-February update of my mid-November letter, right? So that's superintendent principal-driven language, right? But not a formal position by the board. And remember, if the board decides on a resolution, it doesn't have to be what Torlakson asked, right? It can be let's say a more moderate resolution that doesn't, remember when we first looked at this issue, right, there were some legal questions about over-promising, and if you call yourself safe haven, you can't really implement that, so maybe you don't want to do that. So that's my introduction to hearing what the five of you, how each of you feels at this point, which is now 3 months after the issue became an issue, sort of, 3 months after the election and 1 month after not even a month, but sort of a month after, the inauguration and the first week or so of things like executive orders. Okay, so
we're trying to decide whether to, drive forward. I think that was a great explanation of, do we feel confident in what we've done so far? Do we feel we need a little bit more? Do we feel we need a big statement? So if I could just hear from everybody on those three, what your thought is.
Okay, I would like the board to make a statement. I think it's a little bit more powerful coming from us. I appreciate what Hank has done, but I think as the elected officials, that I think it's important that we take some sort of a stand. That being said, I'm not interested in politicizing it, right? So I don't want a political slant. I think that it is sufficient to, except for some of the political stuff in the Winimi thing, they're more or less just restating what the current state of the law is, because I don't think people know that.
Right.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be this panic.
Right.
Well, if there is one. I've not heard of one. Right? No one has talked, and more people complain to me about the lack of an interpreter than have even no one has mentioned this to me. So that's why it's like, I don't want to light a fire. I don't want to make people think there's something to worry about. I'm comfortable, taking a statement that we will comply with the law. That the law does not require us to open our campuses to ICE or any of those. And so, to that extent, I'm comfortable with that. I'm also comfortable with a policy that says we won't do more than the law requires us to do. I don't really want us to be in the business of immigration control. So that's kind of where I am.
Okay.
Similar, except I don't feel a need for the board to take a position. I think stating the law, I think, would be useful, because I think Mike rightly stated that I think most people don't know what the current state of the law is. But in reading through the other resolutions, they seemed to varying degrees political and to varying degrees overtly willing to obstruct law enforcement agencies. And I don't want to be in the position of doing either one of those things.
Kevin?
So it's a subject that I got very interested in when I first saw it hit. I guess I mentioned this when we talked about it last time, but I had requested legal input from various sources available to us. CSBA, I did get some input from a lawyer there, whose input was that he agreed with me that that some of these resolutions seem to be making promises that they couldn't possibly live up to, particularly with respect to law enforcement and exigent circumstances. You know, to say to somebody, I'm not going to allow anybody on my campus, one, I think that's an executive function, you know, really from the superintendent and running the school district. But two, it's just a promise you can't make. I mean, a cop chasing a robber, when the robber jumps over the fence into your school site, is going to chase him. It's not like, you know, you've suddenly reached, you know, the embassy of Ecuador, and suddenly you turn around and start screaming at the cop, nah, 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 you know. So I think that there's an aspect of this that just, I would like to really focus on truth and accuracy, and I guess things that come to mind for me are upgrading our website to have a section on immigration, to make it clear to people, obviously both Spanish and English, that we do not possess information about their immigration status, which they may or may not already know. But it's just not something we even have. So to go out and say to the world, we're not going to hand over your immigration status, you know, I always joke with some of those products, you know, that say, I've said it before, but, you know, it's like corn, you know, gluten-free. Right. You know, my corn is gluten-free. Well, all corn is gluten-free. So I guess I'm more inclined along the lines of less a statement for the board, because frankly, I don't think very many people will even hear about it, unless we were going to send it to the public, in which case I think really I'm more interested in maybe something, again, from Hank, explaining sort of now that we're sort of further into, know a little bit more exactly what are, you know, the fact that we don't have this information, the fact that we do, you know, try to maintain our schools as places exclusively for learning, that we're not in the business of engaging with law enforcement, et cetera. But mostly I think I'm interested in information that makes it clear that we're just not, thank God, we're not really part of that system that would be involved in enforcing immigration laws. Whether we want to or not, it's just not even something we have.
Shelley?
What it sounds like to me is a resolution isn't going to change anything. We're not changing what we do now through a resolution anyway. And I agree with Kevin that I wonder how many people will know that we've passed a resolution, you know, that if we went that direction. However, I would really like a strong sense to our families that this is a safe space and their information is protected. And I have to say, totally, I think by happenstance, as soon as I think it was the day after the immigration ban went through, I got a call from TOPA saying, you know, your paperwork's not all the way up to date and we need your kid's birth certificate. And my immediate thought was, oh my God, if I had an immigration issue and somebody called me in the climate we're in right now, I would be panic stricken. And I don't know how many families were called. I don't know that any families with that issue were called. But although we've done nothing, in that instance, we actually have done something in the opposite direction, in my opinion, making people feel a little more vulnerable than I think was ever intended. I know the office staff just was trying to get, you know, do their job. It had nothing to do with anything that was going on at all, but the perception could be there. So I do think it's important that a statement is made, either through the principals, from the board, through the principals. I think it's important that we make a stand. And it seems like, Mike, I saw something, may have even been a Facebook post, that advertised immigration issues in Ventura, like an event that was happening that talked about.
Just Communities is doing something in March, I think. I'm registered for it. I think it's March, and I'm not sure what.
And I wondered if
Here it is. You all
rather
have it
than
in
a
your
resolution,
binders.
if there was even like giving information about where to get information, that our schools were
Oh, yeah, we just saw that.
You were still the
available
flyer tonight.
We just saw this today, yeah.
to,
February 25th.
I think that would give a strong message. Here's where to get some answers. Here's where to go. Rather than a resolution, I'm not sure that's gonna have as big an impact as our schools saying, here's, we're safe and you can go here to get info.
Right. I feel the same. I mean, I'm not opposed to a resolution, but I don't feel a need for one. I think getting that information, I mean, you'll see actually the police departments are like Oxnard and, they're coming out and they're saying, we will not be enforcing federal policy. We are a state agency. So it's like he said, it's like the IRS saying, please come arrest this person because they didn't pay their taxes. The local police department is not going to be arresting someone for not paying their taxes, and they're not going to be arresting someone for immigration violations. They are a local agency and a state agency, so it's the same thing. We are a state agency. We don't have information on immigration to hand over or for someone to grab from us, and we have safe schools where anyone who has questions comes here, not to the school site. So I think reiterating that information, making people know that our campuses are safe. I don't think we need safe haven, and I don't know that we need a resolution.
Well, that was really helpful. I'm concluding from the conversation that Andy, Kathy, and I will be working over the next couple of weeks to be sure we have all our accurate information together. I will convey that to you before I send anything out, right? Give you a little chance to look at it, see if you think it could be reworded better or worded better. And then I'm going to, between now and March 7th, distribute that as I did before to the principals, letting them know that this is now March, February, late February follow-up to November 14th. And then I'll just put it on the agenda for the next board meeting, just to indicate that this is what happened.
Yeah, now Shelley's issue kind of makes me think. It never occurred to me, I say glibly, we don't have your information, but do we keep copies of people's birth certificates?
Proof of age is required for a kindergartner or a first grader. And so that is so I don't know what age your child is.
10.
But came in.
So she's been there for 6 years.
Yeah,
And I'm just now,
so it's a
that's
new
what I'm saying, the
secretary, so
timing.
she might have been looking through her files.
But this is an opportunity for us, I would think, to
clarify.
ask ourselves, for example, once we get the proof, why don't we give it back to, if we were to not keep because I would have to say, if I were, here illegally and my child was born in Mexico and I felt in the school district had a copy of that birth certificate, I would feel vulnerable.
My understanding, though, from the secretaries in the school is that they legally have to. If they get audited and don't have that copy, then they're busted.
I don't know.
They are audited
They
to
are-
make sure their
right.
email does include proof of residency. However,
Well, that's
their
different.
birth certificate does not.
Residency.
Proof of
Oh, yeah,
age.
proof of age we're talking about.
Right.
Proof of residency is required, but that
Okay.
is simply your street
It's pretty
address.
torture to think that they would take the birth
So we
certificate.
have the children going to the right school, they have the first right of refusal at their neighborhood school, and then they have to have the proof of age, so that's where the birth certificate is
So
there.
they do keep it on file. Legally, they have to.
Right.
Right.
Okay, well, I couldn't possibly list all the nuances right now. So we'll work on it, okay? We'll work on it. But I hear
Well,
you.
and that doesn't necessarily prove your immigration status. Your
It
father
doesn't.
could have a green card at this point.
Sure.
Your mother could have married an American citizen. It doesn't
But
really
it does make
give
you
you.
feel vulnerable.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really
I have a
good point.
lot of relatives who were born in Mexico, so just being born in Mexico
It
doesn't
doesn't say what
mean
your
anything.
status
That's
is.
interesting, yeah.
But
All
also,
right, thank
as
you
we
for all
saw
that.
in
That
the
was,
van, the green
that was
card
really
doesn't
good.
always help.
That was very good. Very good.
Superintendent's report.
Oh, well, let's see. So I guess my focus this month would be on where we are mid-year, and I'll embarrass one person at the table a little bit, my far left. You've all seen evidence of what I would call the unfolding nature of what I shared with the leadership team several weeks ago, and that is the dynamic event that occurs when you have a superintendent who's announced that he's not going to be there the following year, but the person who's going to be there is here already. Right? So I've had all kinds of permutations of leaving districts and entering districts. I have never had, though, a situation where my successor was named a year in advance, and I was still there. So I think I would commend Andy and others who are working with us to try to get to the right point on the continuum of issues that are entirely 2017, 18, and thereafter, that are, again, back on my continuum thought. That's one end. The other is that pretty much the issue is focused on pre-July, August of 2017. Therefore, we need to address it, and I just want to underscore for you what I think you already know. And wherever I've left, my feeling was you work as intensely or more intensely in the last week you're there than you did in the first week you were there. So, there's no let up on my part. But that having been said, it's important for people like Chuck and Angie and the principals who are represented here still to start developing a sense of what it means to work with Andy as the primary decision maker. And I said, I'll be there sometimes whether he wants me there or not, but I'll be there to participate. But I'm trying to figure out, and we're trying to figure out together, where the issue lies on that. You're going to be responsible for it, so you need to own it. Right? I will tell you sort of as a last little thought on that, my rule that I gave to the principals of the leadership team was, I have a responsibility to work to construct the 2017-18 year staffing, for example. Okay? Amount of staffing, how we deal with personnel, classified and certificated. I feel the same responsibility to participate in that and, where appropriate, make the decisions that I have since the construction of the 2010-11 years. Right? I don't really feel a difference in the work that I'm doing, but I do feel a difference in knowing that the issue that we're resolving is something that he'll ultimately be responsible for. Right? So it sort of struck me as I was thinking about the superintendent's report, as we transit, sort of from the first half of the year to the second, sort of what we're doing now. That I think is an important factor, and hopefully, keep coming back to people like Chuck and Angie, that our leaders feel comfortable to come to me, and then I can involve Andy, or go to Andy and he can involve me, right? But that our leadership, and therefore our teachers and our students and our parents, will get the same quality of leadership as if we weren't doing this. Right? It's just a little trickier. So, that's what, at least tonight, is important to me, that you all hear that, and that's what we're working on as a little bit of a different kind of transition than normally occurs.
Items for future agendas. Okay. Consent calendar. Any questions? I would like to recognize the wonderful donors for multiple items, for a place to grow, for the Nordhoff stage, Maestro, Avid, Health Department, the Optimist Club, the Rotary Club. It's stage.
Stage, yeah, that was stage. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you. That and some wonderful field trips. Yay.
Andy, I have one thing.
Yes.
We talked a few months ago about an ongoing Measure J report at each meeting. I would love that.
That's what we had tonight with
So
Ron.
separate from
financial.
Oh,
okay.
financial.
Oh, financial.
In real time, so
Sure.
Not just paid but billed.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. That's our meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks after the vacation.
How do,
For a budget
oh,
meeting.
you go?
All right.
The steelhead line